And now another no-brainer money-saving tip from Progressive.
That doesn't sound good.
Paper shredder's jammed, but I think I fixed it.
Oh, well, try shredding these $50 bills then.
Seems like it's working.
Better try another $400.
Stop. Instead of using money, use regular paper. And here's a better tip from Progressive on how not to waste money. Don't pay too much for car insurance. Drivers who switch and save could save hundreds. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary.
92% of households that start the year with Peloton are still active a year later.
All because of a fancy bike?
Not just bikes. We also make a rower.
Have you ever tried to row? Too hard.
Not with Form Assist. It actually teaches you how to row. So it doesn't matter if you're a first-time rower or a seasoned pro. Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. 92% stick with it. So can you. Try the Peloton Row risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only. Not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 121 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And before we get to this week's guest, Edsel Dope from Dope, I wanted to remind you about all of the stuff that you can find at mistresscarrie.com. You can obviously find all the episodes of the Mistress Carrie podcast and the Mistress Carrie Sit Rep. You can also find all 202 episodes of Cocktails in the War Room. You can check out my blog, my photo gallery. You can shop in the official online Mistress Carrie store. You can keep up to date with all of the concerts coming to New England in the events calendar. And if you want to send me a message, just click the Message the Studio button. The links to all my social media pages are there, and the link to get a Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass on Patreon. There's details on the Mistress Carrie radio show and info on my upcoming appearances, because you never know where I'm going to pop up next. All of life's problems can be solved on mistresscarrie.com. I am so excited about this week's guest. Edsel Dope is one of my oldest friends in music. He and I met each other in the early stages of both of our respective careers, and Edsel and I sat down for an incredibly long catch-up conversation. We talked about everything. The band just released their new video for the song No Respect. It's off of their upcoming new album, Blood Money Part Zer0, that's due for release on February 24th of 2023. Edsel and I talked about his music, his songwriting, how different the music business is now from when we both started in the 90s. We talked about social media and internet bullying, our families and his experience being a girl dad. We talked about his own upbringing in Florida and how he brought himself to New York to make it big in music. And we also talked about the future of rock and roll. And we talked about his company, ECCO Studios, and the 3D motion capture scanning that he's been doing for years. He told me what's coming down the pike when it comes to the Metaverse. We talked about having a work-life balance, which is good advice for anyone, no matter where they work or what they do. And we also talked about his appreciation of dance music and so much more. The corresponding playlist for this week's episode is all over the place. Now, Dope are going back out on the road with Static X, Fear Factory, Mushroomhead, and Black Raven. The tour was postponed because of COVID, but it's hitting the road in 2023 and will roll into Boston at Big Night Live on March 21st. And the tickets are available now. Edsel is incredibly open, he's honest, he's forthright, and well, he just says it like it is. And that is one of the many reasons why I love him. So, allow me to introduce you to Edsel Dope.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stanford.
Cobain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed. Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. You're on the record now, Edsel. How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's good to see you again.
You as well. It's been about a month.
I know. So I saw you at the Rob Zombie show.
Yes, you did.
And we haven't seen each other. I'm trying to remember the last time we saw each other. It was a few years at least. Obviously with the pandemic. It's been a while.
You know what? I
since
think the
we've
last
seen
time I
everybody.
saw you actually was in Boston. Was Dope and Static X played at the...
Oh, was that at the Palladium show?
It was.
Yeah, in Worcester. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then before that, it had been a really long time. It
Yeah.
had been like probably 10 years.
I know. It's so weird.
I know we're fucking old.
Shh, don't say it like that. When I saw you last month, I went digging back through my old photos, and I dug up this old photo of you and I at Loco Bazooka. I think it was 99.
That's probably right. 99. Well, we did a bunch of them. So
Yeah.
I'd have to see the picture. I can date myself visually. I can tell by there's certain things.
That's when we met, right? That was the beginning of Dope when I was still at WAAF.
Yeah, we met in 99. I
Yeah.
remember the first time we met. But that was not at Loco Bazooka. We met, you actually had us on your show. That was the first time we met. I think we were on tour. It was our first tour ever. I think we were on tour with Orgy at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And then we came back and we did Loco Bazooka, which was awesome. And then we ended up doing a few of those and just became buddies.
People ask me all the time about the beginning of my radio career and what it was like to be on the air at night at a rock station like WAAF used to be in the height of, I guess, what people call now the new metal era, the mid to late 90s. And it was as crazy as people think it was and the way that it sounded on the air. Like, the fact that we survived that era is kind of amazing.
Yeah, I'll give us a gold star for that. It was also like, man, it was in a weird way, and I don't think any of us knew it was happening. It was sort of like the end of everything that had been the music business for 30, 40 years prior. And none of us saw it coming because none of us saw the collapse. None of us saw that like everything was going to go digital, that the record labels were going to completely be reinvented. But really, when you think about it, like that's what it was. Like that time frame, it really ended in like 2002. Like that was really when the walls started falling down. So those bands that went to the top at that time, and let's just use an act like Kid Rock as an example, who was clearly a huge part of the new metal movement and really, you know, one of the acts that went the most mainstream. You know, his whole thing was the excessiveness and just taking it all to 14 on a 10 volume knob. But who would have thought that that was the end of it? I mean, Manson would be the other side of the pendulum of just like, we'll never have acts like that again because there's no mystery and there's no, you know, you remember when Manson would be on tour and you'd hear rumors from people like, oh, I heard he killed himself on stage or there was a bomb threat. Like, you can't do that. Like, you can't have that kind of mystery and just, I don't know.
I mean, think about it this way. Music. Back in the day, nobody knew what Kiss looked like for years.
Right.
For years.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, they're just the anonymity and the just a whole different. It's just a whole different animal. So we were really part of that whole new metal movement that you started this conversation with, was really like the last wave of the old model, where there was, you were one of the very few ways for a band to get known in your marketplace. And now it's like, I mean, I'll just put it like this, like back in that time frame, how many new rock bands came out, maybe 30 every year, maybe 40. Like if you were just a kid that went to the record store and you were like, hey, what's the new metal bands that came out this year? They'd point and go like, well, there's like 30 records that would be considered metal that came out this year. Now there's 30 records that come out every hour.
Yeah.
So there's no gatekeeper. There's no clear differential between what's a professional and what's an amateur. And the only way you can really discern it is the production value. But that doesn't even matter anymore, because if you got a rich daddy, he can pay for you to have a good producer and pay for you to have expensive looking music videos. So there's so much noise out there now to try and see what rises to the top. But that's not really the point. The point is more just how we were part of the last chapter of the old model, where there was an MTV and there was playing a late night television show actually meant something.
I tell people all the time, I started at the radio station in 91, and I learned how to edit audio with a razor blade and a tape and a grease pencil. Can still do it, by the way. And those fundamentals are great skills to learn on. I challenge anybody learning to edit audio. If you can edit tape, you can use Pro Tools, because
no doubt.
And then my first email address was a radio station email address. There are old videos of me showing how to navigate the revamped radio station website, and look, if you click this button you can listen to the station. And I look back at it now and I'm like, oh my God, back in the day, if a record company had to deal with multiple rock stations in the same city and a band was coming out with a new song, I remember this happening for Tool. The record rep drove around and hid the CD in the bushes outside of all of the radio stations, and then called us all at the same time and said,
whoever finds it
gets to play it first, because it's outside in the bushes. Because that was the only way to level the playing field, because that was, you had to have the physical CD. Now it's just a mass email. Oh, it's up on YouTube. Oh, it just went out. You can stream it off our website. And back when I was in programming on the radio station, it was my job to kind of be that gatekeeper.
No doubt.
And to sit in those music meetings as the assistant program director and the music director and go, this is what I think is really good, and this is what I think is going to go far and what the audience is really going to like. And to a certain extent, the Mistress Carrie podcast kind of does that, because I want to have a place for these newer rock bands to be able to get some attention, because like you said, there's so much noise out there, and also radio stations that are willing to take chances on new bands are becoming harder to find too.
No doubt. Well, gatekeeper, influencer, whatever word you want to use, but it's because your listeners trusted you and still do. Your listeners know that hey, she says it's cool, it's worth my time checking out. Or she hung out with these guys and says that they're really cool, a cool band, and I should get to know more about them. That's what makes it personal. And unfortunately, that's a big part of what's missing, not just from the music business nowadays, but from the world.
Yeah.
That's why people can go on Twitter and say such horrible things about people that they don't even know, and wish people would die. It's it's just because it's not personal. And they think that it's there's no human looking in my eye, so I can just say whatever I want. It's almost like I like to relate it to the same concept people have when they're driving in their car and someone cuts them off and they're screaming, "I want to kill that son of a bitch." It's because they can't hear you. You're in your own little bubble. But our worlds have become these little isolated bubbles, and it's unfortunate. especially when it comes to things like music, which is why they'll never take the lot. I don't believe that no matter what happens with the metaverse, no matter what happens with just what's the word I'm looking for? I work in the business too, and I can't think of the word right now because my brain sometimes just stops
like virtual
working.
reality and the whole
just the virtual world in
yeah.
general, like virtual concerts. That's what I was trying to say. No matter what happens with all that, I don't think that you'll ever be able to take the live experience away, because that's what gives people goosebumps. Like that loud bass and being around other people, so that when you're excited and you let out your excitement, other people do at the same time. And it's this massive roar. Like that's what makes people get addicted to concerts. It makes you get addicted to the live experience. And there's nothing else like that. So,
and it feels like, for me, I talk about it all the time. I call it the land of misfit toys. When we go to a show, we are with our people. And there's something to be said for being in a massive place with a bunch of other people that love what you love. It's the same thing as saying, oh, well, it's the same thing of watching a football game on your couch as it is to going to a game with 70,000 screaming people in the stands. It's not. Because when you're in that big group, you're part of something, and the energy. And I mean, that Taylor Hawkins tribute that they just did from London, I was in tears watching it on YouTube. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be there. I probably would have been bawling my friggin' eyes out for 6 hours.
Sure. I believe it. I mean, it's heavy duty, man. And when you put life and death into the mix, it's a whole nother animal, man. I mean, we just got done doing that for almost 2 years. We spent on the road nightly doing the memorial for Wayne. And it's same thing. It's tears every night. It's like chill bumps, and it's insanity. But what is music for? It's for us to experience emotion and to, in this certain cases, to heal. And everybody heals different. I can't imagine what Dave Grohl was going through. I can't imagine what it must have been like to turn around and look behind you and see Taylor's kid playing drums. Like fucking heavy duty shit, man. Yeah. And then, the 50,000 people that were at Wembley watching it happen, like it's pretty priceless, So I think the live experience, and I like your analogy of the misfit toys, and just, having that energy in common is something that I think, as long as people are willing to do it, which I think will always be, people will always gravitate to that. And it's so important with how isolated we've become in so many other ways.
Well, you talk about, I can't tell you how many times over the years since I started my radio career that I was told by bosses, you're taking this too personally. And while what you and I do is very different, you and I are also in different parts of the same business. And as a musician and as, I don't know what the fuck to call me, a personality, influencer, whatever it is that I do, that it's you, right? That I'm not playing a character when I get behind a microphone. And so ratings and all of that stuff is a judgment on whether or not people like you as a person, what you have to say, what your opinions are. And it's the same thing, I would think, correct me if I'm wrong, as a musician, you're pouring all of your heart and soul and emotions into something. You created this thing. And then if people don't like it, how do you not take that personally? How are we not supposed to take, even though it's the music business, how do you not take it personally?
But again, that's what makes the comments so disparaging, but also like I have a motto when it comes to all that shit. Like, if you're gonna read the good things people say about you, then you have to read the bad things people say about you. So I would just advise not reading any of it, because it will keep you in the space that you should be in. Because if you get elevated by all the people that tell you that you're great, well, then you're going to lose yourself in that ego and elevation. And if you go to the dumps because all the people that tell you that you suck, well, then you're going to have a very warped perception of like what sucking is. I just wish, and I'll never get my wish, but I just wish that people could act civilized online. Like, I don't understand why, when you remove a person from being face to face with you, that you remove all civility from it. Like, it makes no sense. And I can take it because I'm a grown ass man. But what really bothers me about it, and I'm going to really sound like an old guy, is think of Kurt Cobain, for instance. He was a very soft guy, really. Like, he was
emotionally raw.
Yes, he was not a hard guy. That's why he was an addict. That's why every song the guy wrote was like, I miss the comfort in being sad. Like, that dude was he was that. Do you think that guy at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, if he would have started recording his raw demos and putting them up on YouTube, and people told him how bad he sucked and how bad he couldn't sing, would he have just blown his brains out earlier? Or would we have ever gotten to the point of getting amazing art out of that guy? And that's what bothers me, is that young kids that look at I hate to use the word bullying, because I was bullied, and in some ways it's good for you. But again, it's good for you when it's face to face.
Yeah.
When people don't have to take accountability for the bullying, for the words, for the negative energy, and they can so easily just project it all over something. The fear is that you have kids that, most artists start out as insecure. It's part of the reason that they want to be artists, because they're looking for some kind of validation in something beyond the normal.
And it's not just musicians. I mean, some of the most sensitive people out there are stand-up comedians. They'll all tell you that.
Sure, of course. But again, the stand-up comedians, at least their platform generally is on a stage in front of people. Musicians, it usually starts with recorded audio and then it ends up on stage in front of people. But just, most people that turn to music, in my experience, they're usually not the most popular kid in school. They're usually not the prettiest girl in school. They're not the cheerleader. They're not the football player. They're a little bit more on the outcast.
They're looking for their people. They're looking for their tribe.
And that's what bothers me, is that the young kids today that are looking for their people and looking for their tribe, and they pick up a guitar and they experiment, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to write 50 bad songs before you write one good one. But if those 50 bad songs, and bad is even the wrong word, but if those songs that you write in the evolution and the adventure of understanding songwriting and learning about your voice and learning about what chords go together, if you put that out and you're just enamored with negative energy on it, how many of those kids are we going to burn out before we ever get a chance to see what their potential is? And that's where you hope they have good parents, or they have good people around them that will encourage them to continue to go forward. But I really think that that's one of the biggest risks we run in this type of society that's so polarizing and so quick to just absolutely obliterate people online with their opinions, is just stifling talent before it ever has a chance to become anything. Because it's not like other talents. It's not like sports, where it's like you can go out there and you can run the 40-yard dash and you can be faster than everyone, and it's like, well, that's undeniable. But music is it's
subjective.
Yeah, it's like there is no real good or bad. There is no. So that's why it's pretty amazing to me. I'll put out a new song, and again, I try to stay away from it as much as I can, but then you'll happen to pop over and read a couple things. It's like, this is the worst piece of shit I've ever heard. And it's like, I'm quite certain that it's not the worst piece of shit you've ever heard. You might not like it. You might say, I don't like this song. Okay, cool. But why does it have to go that far? Why does it have to go from, I'm not into this, or, I've heard better songs from this band, just how you would say it to my face. If I was sitting with you and I said, hey, check out this new song, and you heard it and you're like, man, I don't think that's your best work. I'd be like, thank you for the feedback. Right. You don't think it's my best work, but this is the biggest piece of shit I've ever heard in my life. You would never say that, because it's not true.
Right.
So I just don't understand the need for people to do that. Everybody's got their own opinion. It's a bunch of lonely trolls in their mom's basement. I don't know that that's necessarily true either. I think for some reason it's like being in your car with the windows rolled up and somebody cuts you off and you just feel like you're going to say all this volatile shit. But again,
and then
that's
how
in your
tough
car.
are you when that person you were yelling at stops the car and gets out and is standing in front of your car window going, roll it down, motherfucker.
Right. And I wish that we lived in a world where social media made people accountable like that. And we don't. So we just have to accept it and figure out how to adapt and move on. But as the old guy in the room, that's a disappointment.
I just think about like when you and I met in that era. I'm so grateful in so many ways that like there was no TikTok and there was no Instagram Live and stories and all. There was no Facebook. I mean, we've evolved with it.
Sure.
But in the early days, you and your early days of music, like what you're talking about, and me, when I started on the air, following the trail of destruction of Opie and Anthony getting fired and me walking into the shitstorm, the hate and vitriol that I got just on the phone lines at the radio station was enough.
Yeah, if that shit would have been online, you'd have probably been fired because they've been like, nobody likes her. It's like, what do you mean nobody likes her?
And they warned me. They're like, you're walking into a firestorm of, and even Opie and Anthony at one point were like, we got ourselves fired. She didn't get us fired. Like,
right.
Yeah,
it's crazy, dude. I agree with you. I see it two ways. I grew up when I grew up. So I loved the mystery and the anonymity. And I loved, Metal Edge magazine and Alternative Press magazine when those magazines actually meant something. And it was an achievement to reach the point where those magazines would actually write about you. And they'd send a photographer to come take photos of you. And then they would have a actual journalist do an interview with you and give their perspective on the record. And people had to apply for those jobs and they had to work hard to be established as a journalist and as a photographer and so on and so forth. So, and then there was MTV and like I said earlier, the late night shows that you could play that really, all of those things meant something. So for me, those were the goals and the dreams. And I'm very grateful that I was able to accomplish so many of those. Now, on the flip side of the coin, knowing what I know now and taking away my own personal desire to have those experiences because I grew up wanting them. If you told me what's a better market for independent artists, today's world or then, it's all day long. It's today.
100%.
Like the power that artists have now to be able to reach their fan bases, especially if they're young. Oh my God. Like to be me with the energy that I had and the pulse on, my finger on the pulse of what was happening in 1999. If I could be that same guy in 2022, dude, I forget it. I would have never had those dark times in my career when we got dropped from a major label and we were suffering to try to find our audience because the only way we could get to our audience was through those gatekeepers.
Right.
And when you get dropped from a major label and they're no longer in business with you and they were the go-between between yourself and me at one point. And when they abandoned me, I no longer can even get to you. Other than like picking up the phone and going, hey, how you doing? And you're like, well, who's working the song? Well, we're independent now. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to play your song too much because it's just the way it works. Those dark days can be avoided immensely if you have direct access to your fan base, which we didn't have back then. And so kids today, they have a whole different, set of challenges to overcome, but man, they really have an amazing platform, which I'm very, very envious of,
I mean, back in the day, if a radio station had one woman, right? I was the chick, then, we got one.
Sure.
And so in a lot of ways, I was fortunate to become the chosen one, but in a lot of other ways, it was like, the door got slammed behind me because, we only needed one woman to talk about rock music. And even then, I had to kind of prove that I knew what the fuck I was talking about.
And that you had balls.
Yeah.
For a lack of better words.
Oh,
like
I got them. I just wear them on my chest so I show off how big they are. That's
right.
You know?
You just had to prove you could hang, which, like, you know, and that's an interesting set of challenges there too. But you met them head on for sure.
Does it make you more aware of everything that we're talking about now because you're a girl dad now?
No. Well, everything we're talking about, what do you mean? Like, what are we talking about?
Just about the online bullying and all of the digital pressures and kind of all of that stuff. Now that you've grown up in the era before that and raising a child now that will grow up never knowing what life was like before a smartphone, the internet, social media, and especially the unique challenges of how that affects girls in this world now with the bullying and all of that stuff.
I would say not so much because she's so young. She's only 2.
Yeah.
But I will say that I am more involved in it because I have a 17-year-old stepson who's been in my life for 5 years. So I definitely am more in touch with it through him. But I'm also not his dad. And I also wasn't around through the whole making of him. So I have to like play my role properly. So I don't, I don't overstep. But in in comparison to my daughter, though, it's certainly my imagination has gone into the future and wondered like, what's it going to be like when she's 14, when she's 13. But all I can do is wait and see how that all comes to be. And for me, it's just more about trying to establish in my own head how I want to educate her and how like I want to be one of those people that my daughter, I feel like, will be very well armed, very well equipped to understand like men and to understand boys and to understand the power that she ultimately has just by being a young woman.
Yeah.
It's very, it's interesting when I for whatever reason, I really wanted a girl. Like when we found out that she was pregnant and my wife really wanted a daughter as well, because she already had a son. And for me, I know why, because I ended up doing some soul searching on it. But like in the very beginning, I was like, I just knew I wanted a girl. But I had a talk with my older brother who has a young son. And he was like, what's awesome about having a daughter? And I was like, tell me, big brother. He goes, well, he's like, they're actually a little bit more valuable. They're a little bit more precious. And I was like, why is that? He said, well, if you look at the world as a whole, if you have on average 50% of the babies born around the world are male and 50% are female, but then you think about how many places around the world women are not equal. They're not allowed to go to school. They're not allowed to just be themselves. They're stifled in so many ways. He's like, even though you're going to have a daughter that's raised in America where she has the freedoms, when you look at it on a global scale, a free, powerful, intelligent, confident woman is an incredibly, incredibly valuable and precious asset to the world.
An important asset.
Yes, 100%. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that I wouldn't have really thought of globally. I was just thinking about, this is my daughter and I've grown up in America. And of course I've traveled the world and I've seen a little bit of that. But yeah, it's crazy. But I definitely do not see myself as that dad that's like, trying to forbid her from dating or trying to, I want her to be like I was. I want her to be very independent and very fearless and very much ready to just, go out in the world and take what she wants, respectfully. So we'll see though. I have no idea. She's 2 and she seems pretty crazy and pretty ambitious. I mean, she's pretty fearless.
That was one of the big mile markers for me when you and I saw each other recently, was that it didn't take us long before we started showing each other pictures of our families, which if you had told me that that's what we were going to be doing like 20 years ago when we were getting drunk backstage at shows together and acting like idiots, because like you, I have bonus kids. That's what I call them.
Right.
That I'm their bonus mom and they're my
Right.
bonus kids. And that when I married my husband, I wasn't just marrying my husband, that I was accepting the responsibility of being another adult that watches over these kids and has their back through everything.
Sure. I love it.
And it's an interesting, like I've got teenage bonus kids, boy and girl, and it's very interesting when, you know, I didn't have my own kids and now all of a sudden, bonus mom,
Yeah.
purple-haired radio DJ, look out.
Yeah, but I don't know if I've asked you this before, but for me, I was raised in a broken home. I have good relationships with both of my parents, but I also have step parents. So I don't know why, but for me growing up, I always looked at it as a bonus because I got along great with my step parents and they were very different from my real parents. So I ultimately was exposed to 4 adult role models that I know loved me and had my back, that I could pick and choose.
And 2
the
happy
characteristics.
couples, right? 2 people,
True.
2 couples that were happy as opposed to
Well,
one
happy
set
enough.
of parents. Yeah, instead of one set of parents that
Yes.
hated each other that stayed together for the kids.
Yes. But more importantly for me, and yes, that's very, very accurate. But more importantly for me was being able to pick and choose the traits of those 4 people that I looked up to and respected that I wanted to incorporate into myself, and then look at the traits that I was like, yeah, I'm not really with that.
Yeah.
Or with that. So it just gave me more to choose from it. But because, you know, when you're a kid, like, how many adults do you, other than teachers, how many adults do you really have deep conversations with? Like,
Right.
not very many. So I was able to do that with 4 people instead of 2 people. And 2 of those people, there's a different trust. There's a different thing that happens with step parents than with actual parents, where I feel like the kid feels a little bit more like you're their friend.
Yeah.
So therefore, maybe they're willing to like be a little bit more open, maybe not feel as judged, maybe not feel as ashamed, maybe not feel as embarrassed. So for me, that was very powerful for my upbringing. And I feel like I also incorporate that into my relationship with my stepson. And I'm sure you do the same thing.
Yeah. My
which
parents
makes
didn't
me-
split till I was an adult,
Got
which
it.
is a totally different situation
different.
because you're then involved in the divorce,
Yeah, that sucks.
which totally sucks. And I mean,
Yeah, my parents were divorced when I was like 4. So
which
I don't
sucks in
even
a
remember.
completely different way.
No, it was cool though. I'm not damaged from it. Like they did a real good job. And like I said, I looked at all the benefits of just having more people that cared about me
Yeah.
and more people to influence me and to learn from. So, and I got 2 Christmases every year.
Yeah, right?
I mean, come on. Like that was the shit.
Well, and you got 2 extra ways of like getting exposed to the world. And like one of the things
Totally.
that always comes up on this is I have a theory about music. So I'll tell you my theory. You tell me if I'm wrong, that you get exposed to music at an early age from parents, aunts, uncles, older brothers, like the adults in your life.
100%.
And that's the soundtrack to your childhood. And then there's a day where you hear something and you go, wait, what was that? I like that. That's mine. And it
Totally.
changes you.
Totally.
So give me your soundtrack to your childhood and then tell me what that thing was that changed it all for you.
So the soundtrack to my childhood would have been nothing particular. It would have just been top 40 radio of that time. So if you look at, I was born in 74. So by the time I actually started being, understanding or, hearing music in the car and singing along, let's call it 78. So between 78 and like 82 would have been like 83 would have been those years you're talking about where I had no control over what I listened to. So it would have just been whatever was on the radio.
That's a lot of journey, man. A lot of journey.
Yeah, but yes, you're right. But it was more like my memory tells me though, it was less rock and it was more like top 40 pop. It was more of like, which I guess Journey would have been involved in there too, but it was more like, man, I can't even remember the acts' names, but like, you know, like I Will Survive.
Oh yeah.
And like, you know, disco and like that kind of that club.
A lot
club
of Bee Gees.
Yeah. That kind of shit. It was definitely more of that. And in that time frame, I got introduced to Kiss. And even though that's still not my moment that you're referring to, but somehow Kiss became part of my life really young, like 6 years old. I was like painting my face and I had Kiss records.
What little kid? I have a picture of me in like the 3rd grade. And how did, you know, the fact that people were surprised I ended up like this shocks me. And it's me with rosary beads tied around my head with dark purple lipstick on. And I'm standing in front of my bedroom door, and it had 2 posters on it. Miss Piggy in a gi doing kung fu.
Nice.
And the bicentennial Kiss tour poster.
Wow.
And like, if that picture literally, like you could see an MCHQ, right? That right there behind me is a poster for Metallica, and that's a Muppets poster. Like nothing has changed.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Nothing.
And then I think you have an Ozfest 2001.
Yeah, that is from the Ozfest date here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, of course.
So it's like Black Sabbath, Manson, Slipknot, Papa Roach, Linkin Park. Linkin Park is like 5th on the bill.
Yeah, that's the new metal. That's the new metal fest there. Right
Crazy
there,
Town and Disturbed was headlining the 2nd stage.
Yeah, that was a big tour. Big deal.
That was Ozfest 2001.
I love it. But so my big aha moment, though, was I was probably 12, and it was Motley Crue, Looks to Kill.
Yeah.
I think it was because it had so much in common with Kiss because, you know, as a kid, I was really into Kiss, and then I kind of grew out of it and did whatever I did. And I don't even remember what that was. But music was less important to me. And then I was watching MTV, and Motley Crue, Looks to Kill came on. And then I have a funny story that goes along with that. I've been working since I can remember. Like I was either selling newspapers at 9 years old, or I was selling candy door to door. I sold candy door to door for 2 years, from 12 and 13 years old. I was making like $300 a week. My mom was borrowing money from me. This is back in the early 80s. Which is ultimately what led me dropping out of school, because I just was like, I want to make money. I don't want to, you know, learn a bunch of dumb shit I don't care about. But so I was probably 10 or 11, maybe 12 years old when Looks to Kill came out. And so I had my own money from my job, and my uncle took me to Peaches Records. I don't know if you remember Peaches, but they were in the South.
We had strawberries.
Got it. We had Peaches. So I went to Peaches Records. And I got the vinyl for Shout at the Devil in my hand. It's the black on black with the pentagram, and you flip it over and there's fire and fucking, that was the shit.
Face paint and
dude.
Yes.
And then the worst thing that ever happened to me happens. My uncle goes, "You don't want that." And I went, "What do you mean I don't want that? I waited all week for this." He's like, No. If you think that's good, you really want this. And he takes Shout at the Devil out of my hand, and he puts it back on the rack. And well, now I know exactly what year it was. I was 10 years old. And he hands me 1984 from Van Halen.
Oh, God.
With the little baby on the front cover
with the cigarette
in the wing. And he goes, "This is what you want." And I go, "Really?" His name is Robbie. I go, "Really, Robbie?" And he's like, "Yeah, trust me." And I go, "Okay." I went home and I put that on my turntable. It was the most disappointing day of my life. No offense to Van Halen or Van Halen fans. Great record in retrospect. But that was absolutely miserable, and I was so disappointed. And the next week when he took me back to Peaches, I was holding on to that Motley Crue record like nothing, and I would not let it go. And so 1984, I was 10 years old.
Well, look at the records that came out then, like Def Leppard, Pyromania.
Oh, my God.
Van Halen, 1984, the Crew. I mean, that was such a defining, and most people would look at Motley Crue and Van Halen and Def Leppard, like in 1984, is kind of all the same. But the nuances were different because while Van Halen was rebellious, I mean, Christ, they had a toddler smoking a cigarette on the cover of the record. But there was a perception difference between that early crew.
Right. It's like Linkin Park or Slipknot.
Yeah, it was.
They're on the same tour together, but one of them's terrifying. And the other one is like amazing melodies and amazing entertainment. So you can comparison Van Halen to Motley Crue to Linkin Park and Slipknot. Like they're on the same tour, but it's it's the same genre, and you can like them both. But it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And I wanted the scary shit.
Well,
that's what I wanted.
There's a few reasons why you and I have stayed friends as long as we have. One is that we share a lot of the same taste in music, obviously. 2, that we came up in the business around the same time. And 3, that we're both hustlers that learned an overactive work ethic at a very early age.
For sure.
That when you grow up in a family business or you grow up just working and learning the value of a dollar. I mean, I paid for my first year of college with money my grandfather put aside for me when I worked in his bakery selling vegetables before I was old enough to like go to school. He taught me how those lead weights work, and that if you put a 1 pound lead weight on one side and you fill the green beans up till the scale tips, that's a pound, and this is what it costs per pound. Before I went to kindergarten, I could count change back from a 20.
Awesome.
And they thought I was a math whiz, and I was like, no, I just have a Sicilian grandfather that lived through the Depression.
Awesome.
I know how to count money.
Yeah.
And I think that to go back to what you were talking about, the change in technology, the change in the industry, the reason why you were able to sustain getting dropped from a major label and continue the band and your career forward, and the same way that I've been able to reinvent my career after my radio station goes out of business, is that you don't know what else to do but work.
Sure.
Like you just like, okay, so you put a wall up there. Okay, I'm going to go over it, under it, through it, around it. I'm going to sit back and study it and then figure out how to blow it up. Like some people are just like that and other people aren't, I've learned in my old age. And people think I work
100%.
myself to death and that I'm crazy. People must say that about you too.
Yeah, and they're partially right. You know, I will say that like, you know, I think everyone's different, and I don't, you know, I've always been a workaholic. I work, and also my passion became my job. And that's a tricky one that I actually try to encourage younger people that I meet to not do that. And it's weird because yes, you want to not hate your job, but I think that when your passion is your job, 2 things happen. One, you work way more than most people do, because you're passionate about what you're doing. So a lot of times it doesn't feel like work, but then it also does. But what really happened to me was that I used to do music to feel better. Like I used to do music to get over things that were affecting me. And I won't say that I used to, because I still do to some degree, but it's very different, man. Like when it becomes especially when you're as ambitious as I am, and you're not just in a band. Because for many, many years of my career, very early on, I found ways to make additional revenue in the music business that had nothing to do with my band. Yeah. So I was constantly recording faceless music for ESPN or for video games or scoring some crappy movie or whatever it was that I was doing to get paid. And that's what I mean by like, all I did was record and write music, so much to where I got to a point where it was like, it's not fun. I'm not seeking out my guitar to heal anymore.
Right.
I'm looking at my guitar and I'm like disgusted by it. It's like, hey, you want to pick that up and play it? And I'm like, how much am I getting paid? because like I need to get the fuck away from it. So yeah, it's weird. And that's why, at now I finally feel like I've kind of figured it out, where I still have too much going on, but I'm much more diversified now. It's like I have my music parts of my business, and then I have my other parts of business that have nothing to do with music. And then I also have kids, which the best way I can put it with kids for me, and this doesn't, not for everybody, but because I am a workaholic, the one thing, if you would have asked me before I had a kid, what does my life lack? I would have told you joy. And I would have been true by saying that. And that's been something that through the entire course of my adult life, it's part of why I've suffered from depression and anxiety, part of why I probably became an artist looking for that validation and wanted to be in a band and have girls like me and all that shit. Lacking joy has been something that has always been sort of a dark cloud. When I had my daughter, it's like, is it more pressure? Sure. Do I have more responsibility? Sure. Is it more stress? Sure. But I'm accustomed to stress and pressure and responsibility. So just adding more of that to me, it doesn't do anything. I just go like, yeah. So every day I wake up and I have a list that's this big of things I have to handle and manage and take care of. But now I have a constant thread of joy in my life that I never could have gotten anywhere else. And it's unavoidable, because all you have to do is pick up the little person who goes, Daddy, and like smiles at you, and you all of it. I mean, look, you smile.
Yeah.
And that's something that like, I can guarantee you there were many days, weeks even in my life where I'd be locked in a room working on music or working on business, and maybe I'd see a business partner and maybe I would laugh at a little joke they told me, or I would laugh at something I saw on TV. But that's not joy. That's a moment of laughter. Now they're regular. Every day they happen because you have this little person. So I didn't plan for that. That's not why I had a kid. But I will tell you, that's been the most beneficial change to my life is that I now have a constant stream of joy in my life that has always evaded me. Some people, it doesn't evade them. Some people are very joyful in general, and they have kids and it just gives them more joy. But for me, joy had avoided me the majority of my life. Even in my successes, I sort of relate to myself as being a destination person, not a journey person. And generally I'm the captain of the ship. So I look at it like, okay, I'm captaining this ship and it's beautiful blue water and there's palm trees and all these people that are on the ship that I'm ultimately captaining, like they're looking at the water and they're enjoying themselves, and like it's pulling up to the beach now and they're all jumping off and like throwing sand at each other and dipping their feet in the water, and I'm plugging all the holes in the boat and I'm making sure that the mast is fixed and that the sail is good and that we have the backups and that the motor is good.
You and
it's
I
like,
are
okay,
so alike. It's not even
get the
funny.
fuck back on the boat because we're headed to the next island now.
Yeah.
So I didn't even get a chance to like celebrate the island I was on, because even though you say I'm a destination person, by the time I've gotten to the destination that I'm going after, I've already set course for the new one and I'm preparing for it. So it's weird. And I can attribute that to so many things in my life. Like people come to the shows and they're like, dude, you're so good on stage and you control the crowd so well and you must really enjoy it. It's like, yeah, kind of. But like, I really like, what's your favorite song to play? The last one? Like, why? Well, because as soon as I hit that last note and say thank you, good night, like I can look around and go, okay, the crowd loved it. They reacted to everything I needed them to react to have the experience that I wanted them to have. No one got hurt. The equipment didn't fail. We're probably going to get paid. Everything worked. And now it's like, okay, now on to the next one. So that's definitely a character flaw, because it stops me from enjoying things that most people would enjoy or think that I would enjoy. But it's also a big part of what I think makes me a good leader and makes me good at achieving. And I went to a shrink many years ago, and they did this big evaluation on me, and we ultimately came to realize that I value achievement more than anything. That's how my hustle works. Like, it's all about like achieving goals and man, when you set the kind of goals that I've set in my life that for most people are unattainable, and then you attain them, then you're just reinforced with confidence that I can do anything. Like, if I put my mind to it and I work my ass off, I can achieve anything. And I hope to pass that on to my kids as well, because I do really believe that to be true. I believe that, life starts off and you have such width to what's possible for you. And it gets narrower the older you get. And there's this old saying that, like, there's a scary day that comes in every grown person's life where what you could be is replaced by what you have become. So the goal,
the midlife crisis right there. That's what it is.
Right. The goal to me is to encourage young people to keep that as wide as you can for as long as you can. Believe in yourself, work super, super, super hard, and go after the top. Because if you miss the top, well, there's a lot of other places that you can hit that still land you in a good spot. But if you aim really low, like, I just don't understand that mentality.
Yeah.
So
that's why I started skydiving, because I think about the same stuff that you do. And skydiving was the first thing that I ever did that forced me, by fear of death,
to let go.
To let go, and to also be absolutely 100% present in the moment.
Oh, sure.
You can't take your bullshit up there and be worried about paying the mortgage because you're falling 1,000 feet every 4 to 5 seconds. So the amount of time, the window, the margin of error. And so for me, that minute in free fall, my mind got so clear and so focused that was the addiction of it, is that I would land and be like, there's two kinds of people. The kind of person that lands, goes, oh my God, I cheated death. I'm so glad I did it, but I never want to do it again. And then there's the person like me that's like, I want to experience that over and over again as much as possible.
Right. I want to go higher and drop longer.
Yeah. And like, because I want that clarity of vision. Sure. And I think whatever it is in this world that you can find that gives you the quiet, finding the quiet is so hard. And so people are like, you realize how fucked up that is, that you have to jump out of a perfectly good airplane to find the quiet. Like, that's how you know that maybe. I
haven't found the quiet. Actually, I have. The quiet for me is there's a little island in the Caribbean that I go to. I haven't gone since my daughter was born, but that's my quiet. Not the same as what you're talking about, but it's a very hard thing to find, that peace.
Yeah. And I think, when you get to that point in life that you're talking about, where you start evaluating and start figuring it out, you and I also have found a way, which is so funny that our lives just continually end up on this parallel, that when you also have someone that's successful in their own right, that chooses you and says, no, out of all of the, my husband jokes all the time that out of the 4 billion women on this planet, I picked you. And there's something to be said for finding that person that's like, I've seen you at your best. I've seen you at your worst. I understand the crazy in your brain, and I'm all in.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to find.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
For sure.
It's weird. That's how I know you're happily married, dude, because you couldn't get your webcam to work. If you were an unhappily married guy, you'd be like, my webcam works fine. I was on it late last night while my wife was sleeping.
Well, for the record, my webcam does work. It's that I bought a new one so I would look better.
Oh.
And I can't make the audio work with it because it's one of those things where the only thing I ever use Zoom for is all my non-music related business shit, just like administrative meetings and stuff for my tech company. But now that I'm putting out a new record, I'm starting to do all these Zoom interviews like what I'm doing with you. And I'm like, man, I look a little busted. So like this one's got like a nice little ring light on it. And I was like, that'll be good. It's like cheap enough to where I don't feel like I'm wasting a bunch of money, but at least I can put a little bit better produced content out there for myself. But I can't figure out the audio of it. So it's probably a setting somewhere on my computer and I'll figure it out. So you get me with the ugly lights today.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, I love you regardless.
Yeah, the good thing is that I'm known as being a metal dude, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, and that's the difference between men and women in this business is that you get a
True.
pass.
True.
You get
and
a pass.
Appreciate that. I'll take it.
People will criticize like Lita Ford for having a wrinkle. It's like
I know, right?
Lita
it's like,
Ford's
dude, she's
lucky
70.
she lived through the fucking 80s.
I know, dude, and it's amazing too how like Joan Jett's one of them where you go like and share. You go like, how?
Yeah.
How do they still look great?
Money.
Even if it's Photoshop. Like
Money.
I don't give a fuck. It's just God bless them.
Yeah, money.
Yeah, that's a hard gig. Being a woman in general is a hard gig.
You got some good money, some good nutrition, a personal trainer,
Yeah.
the good sunscreen.
Yep.
You know, you just afford all of that stuff. So
Yeah,
you're
it's a lot of
talking about having a new record come out. So I want to go back. You said going to Peaches down south. So go back to the beginning. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Melbourne, Florida. But my parents got divorced when I was really young, and my mother moved south to West Palm Beach, which is, just west of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago.
That's what I was going to say. Like not Palm Beach.
Definitely not Palm. There's a big difference between Palm Beach and West Palm Beach.
Yeah, Palm Beach is like an island, and you have to go over like the causeway to get there.
Yes.
And you and I aren't allowed on the causeway.
Right. Correct. I mean, yes. So I grew up in West Palm Beach, Florida. And then at a very early age, like I moved out of my house. Like I told you earlier, I started working at a really young age. And by the time I was 16 years old, like my driver's license was like, that was it for me. Like once I could drive, that was all the freedom I needed. I was playing in a band in Fort Lauderdale / Miami at the age of 16 years old. I answered an ad in a local rag magazine for a band that was almost got signed. Like they had major labels looking at them. They had, like a real following, like a real band with real management. And, the dudes in that band were like 28, 26, 25. And I'm this 16-year-old little kid. And I auditioned for the band and I got the gig because I was just a bad motherfucker. I was a drummer back then. And so that's actually what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to be a drummer.
This story comes up a lot. People that end up behind the microphone originally started behind the drums.
Well, mine's really easy, though. It's my ambition. It's like, because again, it was watching Motley Crue. It was Tommy Lee in the Looks That Kill video that made me go, I want to be that guy. And then I got really good, got myself into a real opportunity at a super young age. And I say this with all due respect because the singer of that band that I was in, very talented guy, played guitar and sang. But like I noticed very early on, I was like, okay, we got a show coming up. And I'm promoting, I'm hanging freaking posters and flyers everywhere. And dude, I was nuts. I would go and I would put up flyers on the light poles at the nightclubs. And then I would come back the next day and another band had like put their flyers over it. So I got wallpaper glue and I would wallpaper glue the shit. And then I would rub Crisco all over it so nothing would stick. So, dude, you could still go to that parking lot to this day, and there's probably still flyers from my band from 30 fucking years ago. But I would do all this work, and my singer at the time would like wait tables and smoke weed and like just act as if we were just going to make it. And I was like, I don't think that's how it works, dude. Like, I know you're good looking and you play guitar well and you sing good, but like, there's so many more elements of this from a marketing and a promotional standpoint that we're going to need to do to get where we got to go. And it took me about a year of being in that band. And I was like, if I want to make it, I have to become that guy, because if that guy fucking falters, I go down with him.
Yep.
Because unfortunately, that's just the way bands are built. Generally, unless the band reaches a very, very large degree of success, if that guy decides he doesn't want to do it anymore or he just fucking blows it, that's it.
Yeah, examples of the drummer running the band are few and far between. They do exist,
man,
but
they do. But so I that was it for me. At like 17 years old, I bought a little shitty 4-track and I bought a crappy bass guitar off a friend of mine and spent like $600 total. I bought a guitar, a bass, and a 4-track, and I just started writing awful songs and singing into a crappy little Radio Shack mic and trying to like convince myself that I could do it. And then like my brother introduced me to industrial music and I was like, ooh, this makes it even easier because now it's more of just like cool eclectic sounds, and like the vocals don't have to be so singy. They can be just, you can distort them, and it can be more just, so that gave me a whole new perspective on what was possible.
Do you remember the first song that you wrote?
I remember the first collection of songs that I wrote. I remember like the first group of songs that I wrote. They were much more like singer-songwriter, kind of like Nirvana kind of things, because it was when I was 17 years old, that was when that stuff was happening. And then and I actually, it's funny because as I've gotten older, had I been influenced in a different way musically, who knows what would have happened for me. But I've come to understand as a producer and as a singer, like what I'm actually really good at. It's not what I became successful for. Like I became successful in like active rock and metal, but I don't have an active rock voice. In fact, it's a lot of what held Dope back from becoming more mainstream was that I don't have that, you know what it is, that active rock tone, that Aaron Lewis tone, that Corey Taylor tone, the Stone Sour, you don't need to bother tone. Like if I were to pick up an acoustic guitar and sing You Bother, you wouldn't melt. Whereas if Aaron Lewis were to sing You Bother, you would melt because they have that similar tone. There's a lot of guys I could name that fall into that. Pretty much every active rock successful singer kind of falls in that.
It's shocking that Corey has it, considering
it is
considering what he does in Slipknot.
That guy's just not human. He's just not fair. And there's all the more reason that, like, everybody thought when Slipknot came out, okay, 9 mental patients from Iowa wearing masks, terrifying the world. But who would have thought that, like, it was fronted by arguably one of the greatest tone vocally of our time.
Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters told me in an interview that the greatest singer he has ever worked with in the studio was Corey Taylor.
I believe it. And Dave Grohl's another one that has amazing tone. But so back to me, I don't have that tone. And again, it's a lot of what I believe sort of capped the ceiling on Dope having to be what it was. But if I were to say, what would I have been better off doing? Like if I would have been a kid that at that same age that I was exposed to Ministry and Nine Inch Nails, and that's where my career went. If somebody would have taken me to a Warped Tour and showed me Rancid and showed me Blink-182, I would have excelled probably much greater, because the tone of my voice is much more Blink-182 or Pierce the Veil. Like I could sing that shit all day long and you would be like, no way. But I could play you shit I've written and recorded that I was not for Dope, that you'd be like, I can't even believe that's you. But it's like, but that's what, and I so effortlessly can do it. But for me to try to sing like Corey Taylor or like, those active rock guys, like I have to think about it. It's not just what comes natural to me. So anyway, yeah, I took the route I took because I was inspired by the darker side of things. And then by the time I was 19, 20, I think 20, maybe 21, I had really figured it out. And I had watched enough bands either make it or not make it out of South Florida. And I understood the process of what it takes to like get a label to come see you. And then, oh, well, now they have to send the A&R guy down to see you. Oh, now they need to send the VP down. I was like, this process is fucking agony. It takes forever. I was like, I'm just going to move to New York City where there's labels, and I'm going to blow up there. I'm going to play 5 shows and have a bidding war. And people were like, oh, whatever you say, kid. And that's exactly what I did. I moved to New York and took all my marketing and promotional savvy and my ambition, and I unleashed it on New York City and did all of that before I ever played a show. Like I looked at it like the only reason that people care about bands that they haven't heard of is because they're inundated with it. Like they're exposed to it. So I was like, that's why a band is local, is because they have no exposure. Well, what if I spend my own money and I sold drugs at the time. So that whole goal was to sell drugs to make money. I took the NWA approach. I was like, I'm only selling drugs for the band. That's the only reason I did it, because I needed money to market and promote my band. So I'm going to go and then I'm going to spend a bunch of money, just like a label would, to make sampler cassettes and posters and all these things that local bands don't have. And I'm going to make it look like a real band.
That's what I was going to say. It's all about looking legit.
Totally. And sounding too. Like if the audio would have sucked, it wouldn't have mattered. But so I put together a package that was, for a lack of better words, undeniable. It passed the smell test all day long. And then I strategically targeted other bands that were in the genre, whether it be, Korn or whoever would come to town and play Roseland in New York City. I would make sure that every single person standing in line got a little package that was a 6-song cassette tape, because there were cassettes back then.
Oh, I remember well.
Dude, and a flyer to our first show. So for 6 months, I promoted this band and this band's debut show as if a label was doing it. And the first show was sold out with a line of kids down the block with their faces painted, like that were just like treated us like we were a national band. Like we walked on the stage and it was like an eruption. And after the show, everybody wanted to meet us and take pictures with us. And it was all just because of the way that it was presented to them. And because we didn't allow ourselves to be a local band. No one knew who we were. We didn't go out to local shows and show our faces. Like we had the same mystery that a national act would have had. And exactly as I predicted, like after that first show, our lawyer's phone was ringing with like, who the fuck is this band Dope that just had a line down the block and sold out, a show on St. Mark's. So it took us 5 shows and we had a deal. That takes us to 1999 when I met you.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, I had ended up in New York for some reason, work reason. And I hit you up and I said, hey, I'm coming to New York. We got to hang. And I remember you and I think we went out for coffee or something. We were just hanging out and we were talking about business stuff. And I remember very specifically, this was right around the time that Pro Tools and all of that stuff was coming out. And you were the first musician that I knew that was like, there's this new thing and I am going to learn how it works. And I want to be better at it than everybody, because then I can never be fired. Then I'll never be out of a job. Yeah. And you and I had this whole conversation about being aware that we were in this cyclone and that moment. And what if the cyclone stops spinning? Like we're playing musical chairs, and what if there's no chair for us? Like what happens? And you were like, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn how to use this Pro Tools fucking thing that just came out. And because everybody else is going to want to use it, and I'm going to know how to use it. And then I'll always be able to make money.
Yeah, it was for me, it was two tiered. It was, I'll always be able to make money in music, but it was also, I won't have to go to studios to pay for studio time to make my own records.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, that's what it was for me, because I had like lesser quality software that was available in the late 90s, which is how I recorded my demos and all those things that got me popular. And then when I got my record deal, then I learned, okay, there's Logic and there's Pro Tools, and I liked Pro Tools and I saw where it was going, and it wasn't a very difficult user interface. But ultimately for me, like that was the key to me not falling to the wayside when we got dropped, because what I learned really quick was that I could just do what are now very, very common, just all in deals, where I would go to a label, because we still felt that we needed a label back then. And I would say, well, look, how much money are you going to give me for this record? Well, the recording budget and the video budget and all these different things, it equals this much. And I was like, all right, well, you're just going to give that to me. They'd be like, what? Like, yeah, you don't have to give it to me now, but like, you're not going to write a check to a studio, because I'm going to bring you a finished mastered record. And they were like, well, how are you going to do that? Like, don't fucking worry about it. That's as long as you put it on your stereo and you listen to it and you're happy with it, doesn't fucking matter how I got it to you. just know that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to bring you finished artwork, and I'm going to bring you photos, and I'm going to bring you a music video or 2 or 3 or whatever the deal called for. And that was the next thing I did. I started getting into video production and all that shit. So whereas like today, 25 years later, I hate to say it, but I fucking do it all. Like I produce my records, I fucking mix them, which is agony. Then I direct the music videos, and then I edit the music videos. So it's like the only thing I don't do is like color correction in my music videos, because it's just a time consuming thing that I don't need to do. And like visual effects on music videos, but everything else, like it all goes through me, which is great because I can save money from having to pay people. But the drag of it is it makes it a slower process for me because
there's only one of you and there's only so many hours in the day.
And there's also the reality that I also have the kind of brain that likes to try everything before I consider something done. So it's like, whether it's a song or a video, I might cut it or arrange it 5 different ways. Not because I didn't like the original way, but I'm going, I might like it better if I do this. And then I go down 32 rabbit holes, and maybe I still wind up where I started, but at least I know like that's the best way for it to wind up for me. So and then I'm the only one imposing deadlines too, because I'm also the manager of the band and now I'm the record label too. So like no one's going to me, dude, that has to be delivered by February 15th. Like I'm like, well, if I don't have it done by February 15th, it just gets pushed. What are you going to do? Fire me? So
yeah, your boss is a dick.
Yeah, that's the only negative that, like, you know, that's why it took me 6 years in between albums this time, because I got too much going on, and and it all runs through me. So I believe that this will be the last full-length album that I'll ever make, because I feel like it's not the right model for people's attention spans now anyway, and it's not the best model for me to function in a productive manner. I'll just put a song out when it's done. And I'll just shoot a music video. And
that's
it's like,
how it used to be. Look at the 50s. They released singles with a B-side on a 45. The concept of the album, that came out in the 60s, but the early days of the music business was all single driven.
And it was in the album model just became a better way to make more money for the labels, to put out a bigger thing to charge more money, which at this point in the game, I could care less. I don't know if you even noticed, but like I'm giving my album away for free. So I don't even give a shit about that. But I felt like after it being so long, and also because the last album I put out before this one was titled Blood Money Part 1, which gave everybody the feeling that like there was going to be another part to it, which was true. And most of the music written on this new album came from that same time frame. So I that's why I felt compelled and almost like responsible for putting out another full length that sort of wraps up Blood Money. I ended up going the other direction and calling it Blood Money Part Zer0.
I was going to say, like, if you're going to number records, you're kind of doing it backwards.
Yeah, I ended up going with the prequel instead of the sequel. It felt more appropriate to me, and it also allowed me to troll the trolls with this whole Static X thing that's going on, because they have nothing to do with one another. But it just gave me a way to just, you know, fuck with people. But yeah, I felt the responsibility to put out this as a full length. But after this, I got tons of shit recorded. And I'll just put stuff out when I want to and when it feels like it's done, and it just feels like less pressure. And I think the fans will be happier with a steady stream of content instead of waiting years to get this big thing, which just feels like more pressure for me, and it's not fun that way for me. But I had to go through the process, and we're almost there. So.
I mean, some artists, the songs, you know, like imagine Pink Floyd releasing one track at a time of The Wall. Like there are just certain things that it's required to release as a body of work.
Sure.
But other times it's like, I feel like
people wouldn't consume The Wall today the way they consumed it back then. Either.
Right. You're right.
Think about that. Like you would release The Wall today and people would be like, yeah, I got track 2 and 3 in the playlist. The rest of it's crap. Because they listened to it one time.
So true.
Dude, that's the other big disappointment about releasing a full album nowadays, is I feel like people literally, they put it on their player, they hit play, they listen to 45 seconds of a song, and they may never listen to it again because they've just decided in that 45 seconds that like, yeah, let me move on. And back in the day, because there was far less content, people had more time. There were also radio stations that only played you one song from the artist at a time. And if the song was reacting, they played the shit out of it. How many songs did you play or hear in your life that you were like, yeah, the first 10 times I heard it, I don't know if I liked it, but now it's one of my favorite songs ever.
Yeah.
That shit is missing.
Yeah,
like
it's true.
People's attention spans are so short. It's another reason that it just makes putting out albums that much more discouraging for an artist to go like, why bother? Like, people don't want to consume that much content from you anyway. Some people do, but the majority of people really don't. I think if you gave them one song at a time, you have a much better chance, which is, I'm kind of doing that as a human experiment right now. My album doesn't come out until February. But that just means that's when the last song will be released. What I started doing was I released 2 songs when we announced it, and I'm releasing a song a month actually a song every 3 weeks until we get to February, and then the last song will be released. So I am kind of testing that by putting out a song and going, here's a song, and you got 3 weeks to absorb it and consume it and either like it or don't like it, and then you'll get another song 3 weeks later. So I think by doing that, for the people that are actually engaged with the band, they'll probably listen to that song more than they would have if I just would have given them 13 and gone, here you go. Like, they may have listened to that song one time and passed on it but now, since it's the only one they have, maybe they actually will listen to it a few times before they make up their mind. I don't know.
And you know what's funny is that on my side of things, from my experience being a radio DJ for the lion's share of my career, it was all about the small segments, right? That me going on the air, it was like, okay, I've got 35 seconds or 45 seconds, or if there's a band in the studio, I've got a few minutes, and then we got to get into the song and we got to get into commercials on time. And, you know, the record people and the manager and even the band are like, well, we got to plug the show tonight. We got to plug the record that's coming out. And it didn't leave any room for anything. And
right.
So while you're getting more and more fragmented, my side of the business is getting longer form, because what people are realizing is that they wanted to hear more. The conversations you and I had before we did the interviews on the air
were way cooler.
The conversations we had after the show, at the concert, on the tour bus, that's the good stuff.
You may not remember this, but you threw me under the bus the first time we ever met.
I did?
Yep.
Totally,
and it
sounds
was funny
like something I would have done.
Because after the interview, I can't remember who it was in my band, but somebody was like, that was fucked up. And I was like, that was a little fucked up, but I kind of like her for it. You, first time I met you, we came in and we sat down and we talked for a few minutes, like you were talking about, without pressing record. And then you said, is there anything that you don't want to talk about? And I said, honestly, yeah, I really don't want to talk about Marilyn Manson. And you were like, why? I was like, well, we get compared to Manson a lot because back then we did. And it was a bit unfair. We got compared to them a lot more than we should have.
Yeah.
And it was also because I truly did have a past with those guys. Like, I grew up with all those guys in Fort Lauderdale and they were my friends. And so I had a whole backstory, but I wasn't using that backstory to promote my band. I wasn't talking about how I grew up with those guys or that the drummer of Manson was my best friend in the world. Like, I wasn't using that relationship to try to move my band forward.
Yeah, you weren't riding on coattails. You were establishing
yourself. It felt wrong to do that.
Yeah.
But naturally, for the timeline and everything like that, people just wanted to use Manson as a reference point for Dope, because we didn't drop tune, we didn't sound like Korn, we didn't sound like Limp Bizkit. So there was really and Zombie, for whatever, I guess we got compared to Zombie, but maybe it's because my hair was so long, whatever it was, we got the Manson comparison more than anything. And I just didn't want that to be the topic. So that's what I said to you. I said, and you didn't ask me too deep on it, or maybe you did, but I gave you a very short answer as to why. But I was like, yeah, I just don't really want to talk about Marilyn Manson. You were like, okay. All right, you guys ready? Yeah, we're ready. Record. So tell me, what is it with you and Marilyn Manson? And I went, wow. And I think my answer was something along the lines of, Manson's a great band. And, wish them a lot of success, which they're obviously having, but we get compared to them a lot. And I want to stand on our own 2 feet. And you were like, I like that answer. And then we just moved on and that was it. But I was like, you motherfucker. But yeah, that's what you did. That was your first meeting with me. And I was like, all right, good thing I'm a good sport.
So there's 2 things, right? Because obviously when I met you, I was still very new at what I was doing. There was the don't tell me what not to ask you thing. I stopped, by the way, asking artists what not to talk to them about.
Well, clearly, because there was no point.
But the other thing was, it's a little bit, in skydiving, we call it target fixation, where if there's one place you're not supposed to land, it's the only thing you pay attention to as you're coming down, and then you inadvertently end up landing there.
Great.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, I understand why people don't want to talk about certain things, but I also view it as my responsibility that, look, it's not up to me to gatekeep, to use your term, the audience from the things they're wondering about. It's up to you knowing that you're going to grow up, that you're going to get asked about it because you're from the same area and the music. And so part of it was, I'm still trying to figure this out because I didn't come up being on the air. Like, I was a roadie that thought I was going to be a radio producer. And I'm like, I didn't even go to college to be a DJ. So I was like, all right, well, I'm the only girl in the room and I got this bunch of dudes that tell me this is what they don't want to talk about. Guess what we're talking about?
Yeah, no, I translated that more as you just being like, almost because you obviously didn't have a fucking clue who I was at that time. Like we were nobody. Our first record wasn't even out yet. Like you didn't know if I was smart, if I was a douchebag. I'm sure I came off partially like a douchebag because that's just who I was at the time.
Whatever.
But my point is, I think that was more of just your way of like going like, I don't give a shit. Like I'm like let me make sure you know where you are. You're in my booth. You're on my time right now. And that's why I respected it. Cause like, even though it was like, all right, I see the game you're playing here. I was also like, she just set it down. She just unzipped her pants and went.
Yeah. Tommy Lee style.
Okay. All right.
Which was really hard for me to learn, right? Because in the early days, you get given an opportunity as the token chick, right? And you get put in that studio. And for a while, I probably had the longest fucking radio audition ever because it was months and months and months before I knew whether or not I was going to get the job or not.
Sure.
And so you're in that mid to late 90s new metal thing that was so dick driven.
Oh, yeah. Ridiculous.
And you're trying to make a name for yourself and you're trying to show. I mean, it was very rare that I was in a room with another woman.
Sure. And you just have a bunch of dirty dick fool dudes coming in and just trying to run over you.
Yeah. And
thinking that they're important. Like, I'm a cool guy in a band. I'm important. And you're like, dude.
And you're like, come over here and sit on my lap, honey. Yeah. And I'll tell you, you know. And so I don't remember.
Like, I see this every day.
Yeah. And I don't remember doing that to you.
Because you probably did it to 30 other people. So why would you?
But I'm like, wow, where the fuck did you get those balls? I had no business. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but.
Yeah, but again, I attribute it because I had the same kind of balls. Yeah. But then they weren't earned either. And I think that's what it was. I think it was this little joust that probably, because I don't remember the conversation before, other than remembering that it was positive, but there was probably this little ego joust happening between the two of us, that like these two unproven, kids trying to stake their claim. And this was just your way of going I just want to let you know where you are. Yeah. You're in my house. And it was a good lesson for me. It was like, I never made that mistake again of having anybody ask me what don't you want to talk about, and giving them an honest answer. I was like, all right, that you got me. And that's why I wasn't mad about it.
And I had to have the experience of getting to a point in my career where I got interviewed. And that was really weird for me, because I learned early on how much power the interviewer has, not only to steer the interview in a way that maybe the person being interviewed doesn't want to go, but also even if you walk out of there thinking that went really great, that the person has the audio and can manipulate it
Sure.
any way they want
100%.
and make you sound smarter or dumber or, inept, that they can take that snippet and
context is everything.
It 100% is everything. And that was a defining thing for me because that changed how I welcomed the bands into the studio. It changed how I did my job because I went from, well, first of all, I didn't have to prove myself after a while. Once you're proven yourself, you're proven.
Sure.
But it also, I didn't want it to be a duel. I wanted it to be a dance. And there's a difference between a duel and a dance.
Of course.
And I wanted it to become more relationship based and to give the audience the opportunity to learn about the bands they loved the way that I got to know you guys. Because I got to see the real you, to sit around and debate whether waffle fries or regular cut fries with the skin on or off or better. Because these are the ridiculous conversations we would have late at night. And the audience, pre-Twitter, pre-all of that, where they didn't have an idea of what you had for lunch until you had Instagram to show everyone, was like, well, I'm in this fortunate position to be able to kind of be this conduit between the band and the audience that loves them and be able to show them like, yeah, well, they are those rock stars. They're like really funny, cool, regular people in a lot of ways. And so I kind of went from being the person that you were talking about to being the person that's like going out of my way to make you comfortable.
Sure. But again, that's called maturity. And when we met, we were both dopey kids that didn't know what the fuck we were doing. We just had a lot of ambition and a lot of guts and a lot of self-belief and a lot of people telling us that we couldn't do it. Yeah. A lot of people telling us that we were going to fail. So like, what do you expect those people to be like? So,
and that's been the hardest part sometimes is like the people that I know the best can sometimes be the hardest people to interview. People ask me that all the time, like, who's really hard to interview? Meaning like the artists are difficult. I'm like, no, the hardest part for me to interview people is when I'm interviewing people that I know really well because I know shit that's secret.
Mm.
And and then in my head, as you're putting together interviews and stuff, you're like, wait a minute, does everybody know that or am I just the only one that knows that?
Yeah.
And that can be really hard because it's like keeping secrets and asking good questions. Those can be on the same coin. Like you can still get to the point, but not being a dick about it. Like sometimes that's hard.
Sure.
You know?
But that's your hustle. That's your gig. That's your 20 years of experience.
Can you talk to me about what else, like your company, the CEO, Edsel, and the things that you do that people would have no freaking idea what it is that you do, the movie stuff, the special effects stuff, because when I found out that you were doing all of that, I was like, fucking Edsel. Of course he is.
I appreciate that. I'm the COO owner of a company called ECCO Studios, and we are the world's leading 3D, 4D capture stage, and arguably in the world. There's a handful of companies that can compete with the data that we deliver, but those companies normally reserve their services for internal projects like Sony or Google or, Epic, companies like that. But we're the only company that does what we do at the level that we do it that is just open for business. We're not owned by anybody else. And what that means, 3D and 4D scanning, is that we basically, we capture the assets, which are the basic building blocks for the most realistic, unmistakably realistic digital humans imaginable. So, and they're used for all different types of applications. And of course, as we go into the metaverse and into the future, it's just going to become more and more of this. But, most of our work is in video games, where if you play a video game and you go, wow, that looks just like Tom Brady, or that looks just like so-and-so, it's because it's a 3D model of that person. But the truth of the matter is that unless it's a cinematic part of a video game that's not actually occurring in gameplay, the engines and the capabilities of the machines that are used to play video games can't handle the data. So that's why, even though video games look great nowadays, they're still not photorealistic because they have to dumb them down still. So the real detail in what we do can more be seen in like major motion pictures when it's like a special effects scene, and you take Iron Man or whoever Iron Man's a bad example because he's in a suit, but you take some actual person, Brad Pitt, and he's fucking flying through the air, or some crazy thing happens to him, and you can tell that's him, but he's doing unhuman, unimaginable things, because it's not actually him. It's a 3D model.
So is that like the ping pong ball suits that we see, like that kind of stuff? Is that what you're talking about?
The ping pong ball suits are mocap, which is the movement. So you can look at what we do as creating the puppet. We create the most photorealistic puppet with like poor level detail where you can see every wrinkle, everything imaginable. But we don't make the puppet walk, talk, move, fly. That's a completely different business.
You had me at Muppets.
Yeah. Yeah. Making the puppet Muppet walk, talk, move, breathe, sing, all those things. I call that the space race, actually, because there's so many people that are trying to get to the moon, which is they want to be able to create digital versions of all of us and have them walking and talking and interacting in the metaverse. And some of those metaverses are going to be very stylized, where they won't look like us. They'll look like, South Park or like Simpsons. Like, they'll be cartoony purposefully. A lot of the reason for that is because it's easier to do that than to make something look like a one-to-one replication. But what's going to happen in the future is they need as much high-level, poor-level data as possible from a company like mine that can capture the highest fidelity to put into basically to create databases where you can just, if we were to have a database with, let's just say, 10,000 people scanned at the highest possible fidelity in every ethnicity you can imagine, every weight, shape, color that you can imagine, what will eventually happen is somebody like Zuckerberg will create an app that you can take your cell phone and you can take 10 different pictures of yourself that it'll like direct you to do. And then you'll import those into some app. And then it'll then go into that 10,000 person database that I just described to you of high level geometry and poor level detail, the highest fidelity, and it'll fill in all the gaps. And then all of a sudden it'll return you in a quick instant amount of time with the 3D model of yourself that you created by only taking a handful of images with your iPhone, but looks incredibly hyper realistic because they pull all the data from all the like-minded facial structures of all those 10,000 high-level geometry models that I'm discussing. That's not happening yet, but that's the future, and that's the space race that they're all trying to win. I'm not interested in the space race. I'm not interested in getting to Mars. I just want to make the rocket fuel that they all need to get to Mars, because that helps my business be completely and totally focused on one thing. We're the best at what we do, and we do something that a lot of people need. So let them use our data for whatever they want to use it for. I just gave you one example. Of course, there's movies and video games and all kinds of other places. But it's a crazy time, and it's only going to get crazier. I'm super grateful for my team and for my business partner, who's an incredibly talented guy. He's like the brains of the tech side of our business, which is really 3D scanning is kind of a digital art form, really, because it's a combination of technology and art, because there are little things that you have to smooth out and things you have to do to perfect it. But what I've done and what my role at the company is in addition to being a good marketing head, my job is the job that I have taken on is to allow my business partner to sort of be the artist in the way that I always wish I could have found someone to do for me. So he doesn't have to worry about any distraction. He doesn't have to worry about administrative. He doesn't have to worry about negotiating deals. He doesn't have to worry about paying the lease on the building. He doesn't have to worry about shit. He just comes to me and goes, hey, dude, do we have enough money for me to buy this? Because in order for me to go the next place I want to go, I need 50 of these. And they're, 22 grand a piece. And I go, all right, well, I'll let you know in a couple of days. Let me come back to you and do the math and figure it out. But I insulate him from all the bullshit that nobody wants to deal with, which is incredibly important part of running a successful business.
Nothing kills creativity like budgets.
100%. And at the same time, he really has a tremendous amount of faith and trust in me to help guide the direction that we go, because again, we've been doing this together now for about 8 years. And in those 8 years, there have been so many times where we've sat down and been like, well, do we want to expand into this? Do we want to expand into that? And I seem to be the person that continues to keep us focused in one direction. And while we have expanded into offering a few different things that go along with being the best 3D scanning, 4D scanning company in the world, as I mentioned in layman terms earlier, there are ways that we could get involved in making the puppet walk and talk, but I don't want to do any of that, because that would mean that less of our focus and less of our attention is focused on being the absolute best at what we do and moving the tech and the technology forward in the field that we're already experts in. So until we were to either become acquired by another company, or we were to decide to get funding to expand into something like that, and there was actually a real budget to bring on an entirely new division, maybe I would entertain it at that point. But as long as we're a self-contained small business and we're spending our own money, I think it's within our best interest to just be very boutique and be the best at what we do. And I mean, it's bananas. Like today, Kylie Jenner is in our office. I'm probably not supposed to say that, but that's what happens. I mean, it's Vin Diesel last month, and it's Kylie Jenner, and then it's, The Rock, and it's insane.
If you're scanning The Rock, is he nude?
No.
And what does he smell like? Because these are the tough questions I need answers for.
I cannot tell you that. I do not know. But I will tell you that when we scan them, and if you want to, you can go to ECCOstudios.com. It's ECCO Studios.com. And if you scroll down, there's a video. It's actually us scanning Terry Crews, who's like The Rock. He's an incredibly well-together gentleman.
Not only is he glorious to look at, but I have a theory about certain people. I think The Rock smells fantastic. Never met him, never been close enough, but he seems like the kind of guy that smells good. Terry Crews seems like the kind of guy that smells good.
Terry Crews, I remember, I don't remember what he smelled like. That would be weird. But I do remember his energy just being fucking amazing. Because we spent a lot of time with Terry. He was in for a full day. We did a bunch of R&D with him. But super, super kind man, funny, joking all the time. But if you watch that little video clip, it'll give you a better idea of what we do. It's literally 2 minutes long. But when we're scanning full body, generally, the model will just be in underwear. So boxer briefs. But when we're scanning their head, then you're just wearing an A shirt and it's just scanning their head. But yeah, Terry was great. I mean, we've scanned so many people, and a lot of them we're not allowed to talk about because we sign R&D. I mean, we sign NDAs, and until the game is actually released or the movie is actually released, we can't talk about it. We did Sylvester Stallone for whatever the new movie that he just put out came out. Another really, really super nice guy. I think it's also the environment to which we're inviting people into. It just, and when we built our company and we built our space, that was another part of it, was like making it a very interesting place for these people to come. And for them to walk through the door and just kind of immediately the way that they take in the space when they walk in, it's like, okay, I'm somewhere pretty fucking cool. And I'm looking at all this shit. And this is like, all right, I've just teleported somewhere else.
It's important. It's like what we were talking about the studio with me and wanting people 100%. To come in and be comfortable. You're going to get your best 100%. Work that way. You get a better interview that way.
I'll tell you a small story. We used to have a really small location when we first got started, and it looked very like we presented it the best we could, but we were subleasing space from another studio, and I remember Sylvester Stallone, for example, he came in, and this was probably 3 years ago, maybe longer. And super nice guy, hung out for like probably an hour longer than he even had to, and just asked questions. And we were talking about potentially scanning him and de-aging him so that you could go back and do a prequel of Rambo and he could still play Rambo because it would be him. Great conversation, shook my hand, left the office. And the first thing I did, because I'm a fucking nut, I looked at my business partner and I go, you know what he's thinking right now? And he goes, what? I go, he's walking out to his car and he's thinking, I hope those guys make it. Because that's where we are right now. I go, when we get our new spot and we move into the 10,000 square foot building that we want, we're going to fucking make that place so awesome that when Stallone walks in and has an experience and leaves, he's not going to question whether we made it. He's going to be going, oh yeah, those guys made it. And that's what we did when we moved into this place. And Terry Crews was one of the first guys that came in and did a bunch of R&D with it. And it reaffirmed everything that I wanted, which was that he walked in and was unquestionably impressed by the presentation of the experience. And that's a big part of it, especially when you're dealing with these AAA celebrities. Like, you have to make them feel comfortable, and you have to make them not feel like you're Googling over them, and like, which a lot of people can't do. A lot of people can't resist. Dude, it had Paul McCartney in there, and like, you can't resist getting a selfie with Paul McCartney, but like, I didn't. In fact, I freaked everybody out because Paul walks in the room and he's got this entourage with him and he shakes everybody's hand.
This is Paul fucking McCartney.
Yeah, Paul McCartney. And everybody and somebody goes like, somebody said something. And I was like, but if only the guy could write a song, straight faced. And dude, when I tell you, like, the room was like silent, and then Paul laughed, and I was like, yeah, like, he got it.
Everybody treats him like a Beatle.
Yeah, best songwriter on the planet. I just made a fucking joke. So like, and again, that reaffirmed to me that like, I know how to handle these people, and like, they don't want to be like coddled, they don't want to be Googled over, they want to be in an environment that they know is safe, and that there's not a bunch of people trying to take selfies with them and go on Instagram and post, but they also want to feel like a person, and they in the right settings, they want to laugh, and they want to feel like they're amongst people that get it, not amongst people that like feel so blessed to be in their presence.
And that are going to do a good job. Yeah.
Yeah. They're there to work. Like, they're there to create something, and they have to trust in you that you're not wasting their time. And part of that is just your personality, not making them feel like you're a fish out of water because Paul McCartney's here. It's like, no, dude, this is what we do every day. Like, nice to meet you, Sir Paul. Go over there, do this, and then get into this rig over here, and we're going to tell you what to do.
In your boxer briefs, Mr. McCartney.
Yeah. But yeah, that was cool. Paul was a really nice guy. Like, we've had a lot of them, man, a lot of really big time people that I never would have thought I would have worked with, and just working with them in a very different way. But it's gratifying to me on a number of levels, and it's a much more ethical business in the music business. I don't have to chase people around for my money. It's great. You send really big invoices to these companies, and they pay them like they're supposed to. Like they don't argue with you. They don't try to chip you down. Like it's a real growth industry as opposed to, the music business where I can't tell you how many times I've done a job for an agreed amount of money. And then by the time I get paid, it's the cry poor mouth and this and that. And I got a third of what I was supposed to get. And I did the job at 100%. Why did I only get 33% of the money?
You know what it is? I'll tell you what it is, because I've dealt with that too, is that what you and I both do on the music business side of things is not tangible. And
True.
So if I get hired to host an event,
Sure.
what I did while I was there doesn't exist when I leave.
But there's also this certain it's built into the business that we're in. There's this idea that there's an experiential reward for us.
Yeah.
And
you're lucky
people don't,
that.
Yeah. It's like, and for both of us early in our career, that shit works.
Oh yeah.
You tell me, hey, I'm going to put you on stage in front of 3,500 people. You're going to play to a huge crowd. What do I got to do?
Yep.
I don't care how much money I'm making. I just want to play in front of that audience. But once you've had those experiences, then you start to go like, oh, I belong here. And it doesn't mean I have an ego. It just means I know my worth. It's like, I belong here. I do the job that I was hired to do. But why is it that my money always comes up short? Well, because it's the music business and it's expected to be that way. And that's why it's set up so early on to give artists drugs and girls and keep them happy so they don't pay attention to the books.
How many times have artists had their managers and agents and record companies take all their money? People that
all the time
you would have thought would have been gazillionaires, and then they turn around and they're like, wait, where's all my money?
Yeah, Mike Tyson. It's insanity.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. I mean, so I really am grateful to have something that I have built outside of the music business. It's just more ethical and also doesn't burn me out in the same way as the music business does, because it's a different type of energy. And this isn't my first dip into the non-music side of things. For back in like 2008 or 2009, I took a break from touring for a few years, and I went to work for a global marketing agency, which started out as like a sort of a music supervisor gig for a publishing company that was doing music for the NFL and Major League Baseball and all these major brands. But then once they sort of got to know me, they were like, this dude's got a really interesting take on everything. So let's just start throwing him into meetings, marketing meetings for Indian Motorcycle or for Nissan or for whatever it was. And I spent about 3 years doing that, and I was really successful at it. I made good money. I had a lot of good relationships, but it became very clear to me that being the junkie for ambition that I am, that if I wanted to climb that ladder and I wanted to really succeed at that business, the way I put it to myself was I was going to have to become one of them. And I was going to have to become like a marketing guy, which really is like the modern day version of Mad Men. And I was like, dude, that sounds like buying a tombstone. Like that sounds like this is my life. And I'm going to buy a piece of property close to the office. And like, I'm going to go to this office every day for the next 20 years. And I'm just too much of an entrepreneur. Like it just felt like, maybe I'd have a good salary and maybe I'd be happy for a little while, but eventually like I'm going to start feeling like they own me because I have no freedom to like just go like, hey, but I want to do this.
You're a shark. Sharks die when they stop swimming.
I know. And like, I remember that specifically. I was, when I was working for that company, I had to go out to Sturgis and I was running a promotion for Indian Motorcycle. And that dude, Mike Rowe, from that
The Deadliest Catch and Dirty
no,
Jobs.
No, not Mike Rowe. I'm sorry. We did something else with him. What's the guy's name from the American Picker show?
Oh, yeah. Hold on.
Anyway, that dude, he was like the thing there. So I was in charge of all the production around this thing, and I needed to have something hung. And I was like, all right, what's that going to cost me? It's like, well, you got to have a guy come out with the crane and the bucket, and it's going to end up being like $1,500, and got to get, and I'm going like, and I'm calling and like, oh, well, you got to get that approved. And I was like, hey, dude, can I give you fucking $100 to climb up that fucking pole and wrap that thing around it and hook this thing and that'll be enough. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And he went up there and I gave him $100 cash and I wrote it down. And I almost got fired for this. Like, not almost got fired, but I got chewed out for it. It was like, first off, you're never going to get your $100 back because we can't pay you
don't
back
have a receipt.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm like, I don't even care about the fucking $100. I just wanted to get the job done. And that was like one of my first experiences with bureaucracy and like the corporate red tape you have to go through to accomplish anything. And I was like, I can't succeed under these types of, like, when I can solve it for $100 right now, but you're going to make me wait 2 days and it's going to cost me $1,500.
That doesn't work.
I can't roll with you. Like, we're not good. So that was a great experience for me, and it gave me an opportunity to like stop touring for a while and work on myself. It was when I was kind of going through a real self-aware time frame in my life where I was getting over what I like to call Peter Pan syndrome, which most guys in bands go through. But a lot of them, even to this day, I know lots of Peter Pans that are my age. But for me, it wasn't working, and it was. I just came to realize that like the guy that was on stage, the testosterone filled, ego driven, like get your fucking middle fingers in the air, like that guy's really good at his job on stage and he's a really good entertainer. But when you bring that guy home and you like try to have human relationships, but that's your mentality, like it's not really healthy. So I had to kind of break myself all the way down to like, who was I before I got a record deal? Who was I before my ego became part of my currency? Who was I before I was on a tour bus for 9 months out of the year and there was nobody that could kick me off that bus, but I could kick anybody off that bus anytime I wanted because it was mine. I wasn't one of those people that was surrounded by yes men because that's just not the way I rolled, but I was surrounded by people that worked for me, which meant that there was no way to check me, because if you tried to check me and I didn't agree with you, then you could just leave. It was my world, and if you don't like it, you can leave. I can't tell you how many times I said that to people. If you don't like it, leave. But that's not a good way to have healthy relationships in life. It's not a good way to have good business relationships. It's just not a good way to live.
It's not a good way to succeed when nobody's going
anywhere.
But
right, 100%. So I had to break myself all the way down, and the way that I like to put it in perspective was like when I looked in the mirror, being successful and these kind of things, which I would make my mother proud, and that was important to me. But there were also a lot of things about the way I carried myself that I knew my mother would not be proud of. And those were the things I wanted to fix, because there's no part of me that like, and now I feel like, sure, I still have things to improve on and grow, but like those immature, ego driven parts of my personality, I stamped them out. But I had to kind of like, I had to backtrack and take myself back down to then like, figure it out. But that's the Peter Pan syndrome that so many guys in bands go through. And it's because it's encouraged, and it's show
business. There's a show to the business.
But in our world, for young men especially, it really does encourage immature behavior on all levels, and it rewards it on all
100%.
levels. That's why guys like Tommy Lee, and I say this with all due respect, or a guy like Sebastian Bach, like I haven't met or seen Sebastian in years. But the last time I did, I got nothing but good things to say about the guy. But I will also tell you that like he's Peter Pan. Like he's still like, you talk to Sebastian, you go like, yeah, this is definitely a guy that at like 21 years old was the most beautiful guy in the world and got anything he wanted. And like there's a disconnect of growing into a man. And he's got kids now and he's 50 years old. Maybe he's gone through that and he's like an awesome adult man. I don't know. But it's definitely hard for us to come to the determination that you even need to do it. But for me, it was something I needed to do because I wanted to be surrounded by other adults, and I wanted to be surrounded by other adults that respected me as an adult and that didn't. And in order for me to do that, I had to change what I valued, and I had to change, like, you know, what made me tick. And so being at that marketing company allowed me to unplug from touring for a few years and like reset what it's like to be a normal person. And now I'm great. Like I can still have that commanding presence on stage, but I leave it there. It's like, I mean, you can even think back to when we would talk 15 years ago. Like I wouldn't be this transparent. I wouldn't be this what's the word, vulnerable even. Like,
yeah,
I have nothing to hide. Like it doesn't, because I'm not trying to perpetuate some kind of front. But there was a character in the early days that I thought I had to play, and I always had to be on. And I would talk about certain subject matters, and I would emphasize certain things that the character would be more interested in. And you know, you could list that as sex, drugs, and rock and roll, whatever you want to do to put it together. But I lived that, and it was anytime there was a camera in front of me or a microphone in front of me, that's what you were getting. Do that for long enough.
Well, that's what you think is the only thing people want from you. 100%.
And I was wrong.
Yeah.
But worse than that, though, is that you do that long enough, and then for me at least, it became what I like, that part of my personality that was in many ways an act, which is not the right word, because it was real, but it was a part of my personality on steroids. But at one time, it was a very small piece of me. It became the majority of me. And it, again, even in normal life, like the microphone would turn off and the camera would turn off and the lights would go down, but that was still coming out of my mouth. That was still
you don't want to be
perpetuating.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is how I felt, because I went through the same thing, right? Where 1 minute, you know, you're just this, I was a truck driving roadie, and the next minute I'm this voice coming out of your radio at night. Is that I felt like, how can I say it? Like I felt like that's what you wanted, and I had to give it to you, because if that's what that person does,
sure,
and I don't give it to you, then someone else will.
Sure.
Like for me, when I was young.
I took it home with me too, is my point.
Right. Yeah.
And that was where that was what made me realize that, like, dude, you're fucking lost. Like this, like you're not even in reality anymore. Like, and that's a sad day to look in the mirror and go like, wow, I think I'm hot shit. Like, dude, you're just some dumbass in a fucking band. Like, some people cheer for you when you walk on stage. Like, you actually have bought in to some degree that makes you special. Like, it doesn't. It doesn't. And anybody that thinks it does, they haven't failed. Like, I've failed enough in my life to know the difference between what matters and what doesn't matter. And as much as I love my fans and I appreciate their support of my music and my art over the last 25 years, what they think of me doesn't matter.
Well, it's the same way with anybody's job. And I had to learn this the hard way in the last few years. I didn't know if I existed without the WAF call letters after my name.
Right. That's terrifying.
And then one day you wake up and they're not there anymore. And you're like, do I even matter? Am I even a person? Should I even bother getting out of bed? Because I don't even know if I exist anymore, because that became my whole identity. And there was even like red flags for me along the way, because I remember distinctly being in marketing meetings with people that all of a sudden wanted to start glossing over how long I had been on the radio, because it told people how old I was. And there's a little bit of a difference between men and women in this business, that the guys are allowed to be old.
Yeah, and they'll use it to their advantage because it shows I've been on the air 20 years. I'm experienced. I got credibility. And if you say that, it's like, oh, they know she's older now.
Right.
Like, that's not cool.
And when I started having people asking me about my age and asking me to reword things and take specific things off of social media about like when I went to high school and like all of that kind of stuff, I was like, wait a minute, like I'm not going to be allowed to get old. And I can't not get old. Like, you know, maybe in 5 years, Edsel, you can 4D print me and scan me.
I'm not a printer, but I get it.
To like scan and make me never get old.
Sure. We can do that in the metaverse.
But like, you all of a sudden start going like, wow, is this going to be okay? Like, am I going to be allowed to have a career anymore?
Yeah, that's scary shit.
And like the last few years, I've been lucky enough to be given that answer that, yeah, it's okay. Because
you've learned what I've learned, which is that your audience is growing too. Yeah. And your audience wants to relate to the growth that you've had. That's why I can't write the same music that I wrote 20 years ago, not just for myself, but like, I don't feel like my fans are in the same place that they were then either. Like they want to feel the progression. For you, they want to hear about your life and your stories and like the fact that you are a stepmom and that you do have other depth to your life because they can relate to that.
Well, and people like you and I can sit down and talk about the journey we've both been on.
Sure.
And how it's been the same in a lot of ways and different in a lot of ways. And you can't have that conversation if you can't even talk about how fucking old you are.
Sure. Yeah, 100%.
It's
100%.
just, it's insane that, you know, in some ways those conversations still exist.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it will be less relevant. And as you're going through this reinvention process that you're going through of instead of being the voice for someone else's channel, being the voice for your own channel, all that stuff is defined with a lot less of a microscope because you're just being yourself and you're just connecting with the people that have connected with you through time.
Yeah.
And I think that's super encouraging. For me, it was the growth in me. I hate to use the word, but I was just embarrassed of a lot of my behavior. And just like looking back and going like, dude, you're like, it's one thing if you're a 24-year-old kid, because I think I was a 24-year-old kid and that's okay.
You got the keys to the castle, man.
Right.
Anybody's going to run around and jump on the bed. Come on.
That's what I'm saying. And when you again, you're in rock and roll. So a 24-year-old kid, that's where I was. But eventually I was a 30-year-old man, a 35-year-old man. But still walking around and behaving with the same sort of value system and the same sort of mentality of that 24-year-old kid. That's when it gets embarrassing. That's when you look back at it and again, that's like, I don't really have any regrets because I've learned and grown through all my experiences. But the only regret that I guess I have was that I didn't come to that realization sooner, because I would have treated some people in my life better, which again, it doesn't matter. Bygones be bygones. You know, I've taken accountability, so it is what it is. But that's that's what I mean by looking back and just being embarrassed by your own behavior and going, man, I'm so glad I don't act like that anymore, because I know guys that are my age that still do. Yeah. And I just kind of go like, all right, cool, dude. Glad that works for you. But like, that's like, I did that shit when I was fucking, I hate to say it, 30, but I did. I was still acting like a fucking idiot at 30. But, you know,
does all this time that's gone by now that you're getting ready to release a new record and you're able to go back out on the road again, does it make you appreciate the longevity of career and the journey that you've been able to go on from that 24-year-old kid to now? Like, that now you can do it with the clarity of the brain and the amends and the experience and all of the things that you know now. It's got to be different in some ways to be able to like go out on the road and play with the band and just have fun too.
Yeah. I mean, if my wife liked touring, then I would say yes. because that's the trade-off now, is that like I don't want to do any of the things that I did when I was younger on tour. I don't want to drink. I don't want to party. I don't want to do any of that. I want to go like, ooh, I'm in Cleveland today or whatever. Like, I hear there's an amazing zoo here, or there's this cool museum.
And I want to take
and
the
like,
kids
sure,
and my wife.
I can go do those things myself, but like if my wife and my kid were with me, it'd be like that. So truthfully, I'm looking forward, like in a perfect world for me, like if you really want to know like where I want the trajectory of my life to be, I want to make tens of millions of dollars in the tech world. And I want to not care about the bottom line of my touring finances. Because what that would do for me, because what I like to say about touring for me, even to this day, because I don't have tens of millions of dollars, I'm doing better than I've ever done. But still, when I look at a touring budget, I'm willing to suffer a lot to come home with more profit from touring, which means like, all right, how many people are we going to put on one bus? How many hotel rooms are we getting each day? How many days off do we have between shows?
It's the eating the ramen noodles for dinner so that you can retile the bathroom.
Right. But so for me, I'm generally the guy that, because, well, if I got to be gone from the things I care about anyway, then let's make as much money as we possibly can in that amount of time. And that's all she wrote. So I sacrifice my own personal comfort and the comfort of the crew and the band. We play 10 shows in a row. Like, I'm pretty relentless when it comes to that. And that's part of how I've been my whole career. But in a perfect world, a few years from now, I will have enough financial security from my other business ventures to where we'll say, all right, there's a 3-week European tour. And I'll go, okay, I don't care that I'm going to come home with no money personally. I'll still pay everybody else in the band what they're supposed to get, but I'm going to get my own hotel room every fucking day. I'm going to have a day off here and 2 days off here. And I'm going to bring my wife and I'm going to bring my kid. And I'm going to enjoy traveling the world because I have a reason to do it. And I'm going to get up on stage and play these shows, and my kid and my wife can have those experiences too. But it's more about the other 23 hours a day. Like right now, it's all about that 1 hour a day. And then the other 23 hours are just a formality of how we get to the next show. And we want to do it for as cheap as we can. That's what I look forward to. So as of right now, I would say, of course, I'm proud of the fact that I've had a career. I'm proud of the fact that I can say, man, it really is, because it's 25 years and 7 albums and it's a small business. And I'm the manager of the band. And then also, like, I have parlayed my success with Dope to my ability to affect the business of Static X now as well, and to manage that band and to be the creative director for that band and to have a really real stake in the finances of that band.
And cause controversy in that band, because every time they go out on the road, when I put the picture up, they were like, how did he take a picture with you? He was on stage singing for Static X. He couldn't have been with you watching the band.
Right. And again, I will continue to say that Edsel Dope, the guy you see here, has no interest being the singer of Static X. None. The last thing that I would do is stand on stage with a guitar next to Tony Campos, Koichi Fukuda, and Ken J and play guitar and sing Static X songs. Has no appeal to me whatsoever. Me standing in front, this face in front of a Static X backdrop makes no sense to me. From a creative standpoint, from a managerial standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, also being a big fan of Static X, being friends with all those guys and loving those albums and going, okay, we're going to do something for the 20th anniversary of Static X, and we're going to make this album with all these, lost tapes of Wayne Static's voice and this big picture concept of what we were doing, and then going, and at the end of the day, we're going to have to put it on stage. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, what we felt was best was, as long as we never put another face to Static X, then we can allow Wayne to always be the face of Static X. So we're going to create an entity. We're going to create a masked entity that is there to allow Static X to move forward and to represent Wayne. But for all intents and purposes, all intents and purposes, that character that we created is there to serve Static X. It's not there for me or for fucking Jonathan Davis or whoever else you think or want to be under the mask. Like, it's not to serve the person under the mask, or else there would be no mask and there would be a person standing in front of the Static X backdrop going, hey, look at me.
Yeah, the
so
lead
it's actually
singer
about
of
the
Static
most,
X is Wayne Static.
right. It's about the most selfless fucking act that one can do. But the intention behind it is not even that. It's not to be selfless. It's just to give Static X fans the most nostalgic and most authentic Static X experience possible in 2022, 2019, whatever it was when we did it, without Wayne here. And if anybody that's bitching about it wants to go get Wayne and bring him to the show, I guarantee you that the guy with the mask on would take his guitar off and hand it to Wayne and be like, dude, I'm so happy you're fucking here.
Right.
Go kill it. But that's not happening. And anybody that's mad about it, it's like, dude, who are you mad at? Like, you're mad at Tony or Ken or Koichi. Like, they're here. They showed up. There's one person that did not show up. God rest his soul, and with all due respect, but he didn't show up. And none of us fucking threw him in a ditch. Like, the dude made some really fucking terrible decisions and chose a certain type of lifestyle over being a healthy, productive member of something that people loved and people missed and people wanted. And truthfully, my goal all along with getting into the Static X world started back in 2013, maybe. I when I moved to LA, one of my intentions was I wanted to bring Wayne and Tony back together. Like, I had so much history with those guys, and I did a tour, like about a 12-date tour as soon as I got here. And the only reason I did the tour was because it was with Wayne. It was Dope and Wayne Static. And Wayne Static was out there playing all the Static X material. That's what people wanted to hear. But the turnouts were, not great. People had, in a lot of ways, sort of checked out of the Wayne Static experience because it was not functioning at a very high level at that point. It wasn't giving people their money's worth. It was a lot more of like this sort of Bonnie and Clyde road show that was just kind of going from one town to another to get high and party and move on to the next town. And I didn't realize how deep the drug addiction part was. I knew there was a Yoko Ono thing happening, which I felt like I could handle. But I went into that situation 100% with the goal of I can be the guy to bring them back together, because I know that all Wayne wants is to play in front of the biggest crowds and make money. And all Tony wants is to like the band to feel creditable and to also make money. And being together gave them both a greater opportunity to do that. And the big elephant in the room was the girl with no shirt on, running around on stage, swinging a shovel over her head, wearing go-go boots. And it was like, what is that? Like that's a mess. But I didn't realize how far that went and how far the drugs went and how much that separated Wayne from consciousness. But the conversations that I had with Wayne about this subject led me to believe that other than the drug addiction, which I knew rehab would have had to have been part of it for him, I know the interest was there. I know he didn't have any super ill feelings towards Tony. Like, of course, those guys were hurt because they couldn't get along and couldn't make it work. But Wayne wasn't stupid. Like, he knew it was his wife. Like, he was like, yeah, I'd love to play with Tony, but Tony and my wife don't get along. That's what he said to me. He didn't say me and Tony don't get along. He said Tony and my wife don't get along. And my thought was simple. I was like, well, I'll put Dope and Static X back on a tour together, and I'll just put the Static X guys on the Dope bus, and I'll just let Wayne and his wife ride on the crew bus, and I'll just be the mediator, and I'll manage it, and I'll produce it. And like, I know this band is too cool and had too many fans. Like, this will work if it's healthy and we just give them Static X again. And I really thought that was going to happen. And as I said, I had some really good talks with Wayne about it. But unfortunately, he didn't live much longer. Like the last show that Wayne played in America was with Dope. And at that show was the last time I talked to Wayne, and was like, well, email me those songs when you get back from China, and I'll start bringing them into Pro Tools, and we'll start talking about, what the next steps are to start trying to get you and Tony in a room together. And he was like, bro, I love it. Great. But yeah, we all know how that story ended. So,
and you can't fault the members of the band. And we're not even just talking about Static X at this point. There's always an uproar, whether it's Alice in Chains. People gave Dave Grohl shit for starting another band after Kurt Cobain died. Journey, Queen. The big thing now is this Pantera tour that's getting ready to go out. And until people found out Charlie Benante and Zach were the ones that were going to get behind the kit and the guitar, people, including myself, were like, are you really going to try and be Pantera without the Abbott brothers?
Sure.
Like,
it's a rough one for sure.
Yeah, but the band members that are left behind, it's their band too.
And their fans.
Yeah.
So that's why, to me, it was just about the experience of what Static X was, which is why I couldn't imagine, as being one of the people in the room helping to put this thing together and speaking our thoughts out loud. The thing that I kept saying was, I can't imagine going to a 20th anniversary Wisconsin Death Trip experience and not be able to stand in the back of the room and the singer's hair is standing straight up. Without that, I'm going to feel like it doesn't feel like Static X. Like that was, in many ways, Wayne was the band's mascot as much as he was the band's singer. And that was true in the artwork. Like how, all you had to do was see a picture of like a circular face and then like the outline of hair standing straight up, and everybody goes, oh, Static X. So that was immediate. It was like, so I don't care who we're going to get to sing for this band. If you have a guy standing there with his hair standing straight up and you're showing his face, how fucking stupid is that going to be?
Yeah. Now he's wearing a Wayne Static costume. Like
it just,
or trying to beat Wayne.
I don't even know how to, again, that's where the interpretation of it gets to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Because you could say the same thing about the path that ultimately was chosen. It's all up to interpretation. But again, the thought process was the hair's got to be up. And I'll take myself, for example. If I was to be that guy standing on stage with my hair standing straight up and not wearing a mask with a Static X backdrop behind me, going like, yeah, I'm Edsel Dope, and I just spiked my hair up and I'm playing guitar now and I'm singing for Static X. That feels so disingenuous. It feels so wrong. It's like the only way that I could ever sing for Static X would be to just go up there as myself, because I'm Edsel and people know who I am. But that's not Static X. That's Static Dope. I'm not interested in that. So that was where the creative conversations became clear that whoever was going to sing for Static X, the hair had to go up and there had to be some sort of mask. And there were a lot of different ideas. There was like, well, maybe it can be like an LED X. Maybe it can, like, who knows what it can be. And then ultimately it was like, I think it just needs to feel like a dude. Like, so you can stand back in the back of the room and the fucking strobe lights can go off and you can have 2 or 3 beers. And as long as it sounds great, you're almost going to fool yourself into believing that, like, you got in a time machine and you went back to fucking 1999 and, like, that feels like Static X. That looks like Static X. And I know Wayne's not here, but holy fucking shit, what a great job of giving me a Static X experience.
Well, anybody that ever saw them back in the day, like, the way that people were bouncing to those songs when that band was firing on all cylinders, oh my God. So much fun.
Amazing.
So
and
much
remember,
fun.
We played 200 plus shows with Static X on that first album together. Like every tour that went out, it was fucking Fear Factory, Static X Dope. It was Seven Dust, Static X Dope. It was Powerman 5000, Static X Dope. And then it was just Static X and Dope around the country. So like there's no two fan bases from that time frame that really shared more. Or I wouldn't say there's no two fan base. I would say there's no other fan base that Static X shared more than Dope.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of what gave me the confidence to feel like I would be an asset to helping them, not just from an infrastructure standpoint and from a business standpoint of how to put it together. Because also, let's not forget, Static X never was independent. Every album they ever put out was on either Warner Brothers or Reprise. That's unbelievable career. That's 6 albums on a major label before Wayne went solo. But every actual Static X album was a major label release. So that was another part of what I brought to the table, was the independent mindset of being able to help those guys start their own label, have their own publishing, to be able to like control it all themselves. But again, the big obvious missing link was, well, how are you going to do Static X without Wayne Static? And everybody has their own opinion of what they would do, but they don't get to make the decisions. We did. We chose the path that we chose. And I think in a lot of ways, people don't know what they want. They really don't.
Well, I'll tell you what they want. They want Wayne.
Right.
And it's the one thing they can't have. Yeah.
Right. So do I as a fan. But so at the end of the day, it comes down to going, well, you know, you can say whatever you want, but anybody that you would have this conversation with, which mainly would be here, would be, what would you prefer that the band does? No one's got a good idea. It's like, well, they should just not wear the mask and guy should just be himself. It's like, okay, well, that wouldn't give you the Static X experience. Maybe you want that.
Right.
But the majority of people, the 15,000 people a night that were at Rob Zombie, who most of which have kind of tuned out from Static X throughout the years because the band just went away, they got Wisconsin Death Trip. They got a dude with his hair standing straight up with a flying V guitar singing them those Static X songs with the original founding members giving you Wisconsin Death Trip. And in my opinion, and I think my opinion is with the majority out there, people fucking loved it and they still love it. And all it did was remind them of what they missed. And the band goes out of their way to not act as if they're moving on. The Static X goal is not to move on into the future and try to reinvent the sound and try to become modern. It's a nostalgia play all day long. It's about being a legacy act. It's about watching Static X and going, I feel like it's 1999. And as long as the band takes the approach that they're taking and doesn't put a new face to the band, that's what they'll be able to do. And anybody that doesn't agree with it, change the channel. I don't know what to tell you. Pantera has a little bit of an upper hand because the guy with the microphone is still alive.
Yeah.
But when I was told about it or asked about it, like, I'm still going to say what I said then, which is like, of course, Zach's a great choice. Of course, they made a great choice for the drummer. But I just want to go see it.
Yeah.
And
it just has to be good and respectful.
When I see it, if I feel like it's Pantera and I get to hear walk, loud, and I get to feel the bass drum in my chest, and I see the band up there, and I hear the people around me going, like, if I get caught into a Pantera experience, and for those moments, I don't want to say I forget that the brothers aren't there because that's not the intention, but that I'm not focused on it, then that's a win. That means that, I got my Pantera back, and I'm really grateful for that. And again, that's all the Static X idea was. It was to be able to give people a chance to have the band back. And there's no easy way to do that.
Well, it's incentive. Zach doesn't want to be Dimebag. He's not trying to be Dimebag. He's trying to keep Dimebag's legacy alive. Sure. That is a completely different mindset altogether.
Yes, but but again, sorry if I'm misinterpreting the conversation, but I'm going back and forth between Pantera and Static X.
Yeah.
The difference though is that Zach is arguably as big of an icon as Dime. Yeah. So that's a very easy move to make. You're taking someone we all miss, a guitar god that we all miss, and you're putting a guitar god in his place. So if people think that Wayne Static is a God, he's this guy who has invented this vocal style that he had and did all that. Well, maybe if Corey Taylor was fronting Static X, you wouldn't need a mask. Maybe then it could just be like this different type of Static X experience, but because you're getting an icon doing it for you, I still don't think that would be as good.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel, now it feels like, again, it feels like Static Corey. Like, I don't want Static Corey. I want Static X. I don't want to put focus on who that guy is singing. So but that's why, again, I say Pantera has the leg up on doing something like this, because the guy with the microphone is still with us.
Yeah.
And there's other ways to do it. Like Alice in Chains has done it, but Alice in Chains doesn't do it in a nostalgic way. Alice in Chains does it in a way that says we're moving forward.
Well, that's what Van Halen did. That's what AC/DC did. They were like, look, we're changing, but we're moving forward. And arguably, in some cases, found bigger success that way.
Sure.
Which
100%. But that wasn't the goal for Static X.
Right.
Static X wasn't interested in that, and I don't think ever will be. But yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do it. I think that the one that I'm waiting for is Linkin Park, because it's going to happen.
You think?
Oh yeah, it has to happen. Even if it's just a tour, even if they do it with multiple vocalist guests. I mean, I think they'd be better off just finding one person that can smash it. And like, I told the same thing to Dino from Fear Factory. It's a little different though, because Burton is still alive.
Yeah.
And obviously Chester is not. But if you really wanted to do it, my vision for something like Linkin Park, find somebody, I don't care who they are, find someone that can do the job vocally, put the band on an enormous stage, put the singer in the middle of the stage, but not at the front of the stage. Put them halfway back. Like, you know, if the stage is 20 feet in depth, put him 10 feet back and put him in the dark. And just let him do his job. And let the band and the lights and the production and show Chester's face on the LED walls, but give people the audible experience of Linkin Park with the visual experience of all those guys in Linkin Park, and put no emphasis at all on who's singing. Don't let that guy go out there and jump up on the monitors and go, put your fucking hands in the air. Like, who the fuck are you to tell me to put my fucking hands in the air? You're not Chester. Right. Shut the fuck up. But if you put that guy in the shadows and you just let him do his job, don't use a pre-recorded vocal track, because nobody wants that. That's why a hologram won't work. But get a killer fucking singer to just stand in the dark and sing those fucking parts while the rest of the band does their job. I think people would fucking cry their eyes out having amazing fucking Linkin Park experiences, as long as the singer crushed it.
Well, you look at the Taylor Hawkins tribute and seeing all of these amazing drummers going up and getting behind the kit and playing drums for the Foo Fighters. It was so strange to see Taylor not there.
Sure.
But to see people paying tribute to his legacy, the people that love the band want to hear those songs, and they want to be able to love and be there for the rest of the band members.
Well, and like you said also earlier, the Misfit Toys, like, people don't want to just experience it alone.
Yeah.
They want to go where other people are and have thousands of people singing along and hearing their voices cheering. Like, that's what they miss. That's why I knew the Static X thing was right, because it wasn't about the band. It was about the fans wanting to have their Wisconsin Death Trip experience in a room with other fans, loud and live, like they fell in love with the band. And that's why I give Pantera a large benefit of the doubt, because I think the same thing will happen. But again, they have a leg up because the guy with the microphone is still alive, and you're putting iconic people in the spots that we're filling, which is great. And that's what Foo Fighters were able to do too. It's a little bit more of a tricky subject when you're trying to do it with a singer.
Yeah.
But that's why I feel like, again, like, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to put as little emphasis on the person that's singing as possible, which is very funny with the Static X approach, because again, you had to turn a new singer into the mascot,
right?
Which is what Wayne was also. But you also, it's like paying no attention to the guy in the middle wearing the mask, playing and singing and holding the whole fucking show down. Because if that guy sucked, believe me, the world would tell you that guy sucked.
Yeah.
Because enough people wanted to go out of their way to tell you how stupid the mask was or how disrespectful this was or that, but no one's going out of their way to tell you how it sucks. No one's going out of their way to tell you like, oh, that guy can't play guitar or that guy can't sing.
No,
that
hearing
guy
the songs again felt so good. And it's like, and the riff comes in, you're like, oh my God, I love this song too. Oh my God, I love this song too. Like,
it's just such a great record.
As a fan, you miss that stuff.
Yeah, it's so good. So I agree. So again, I think the approach is to try to put as little emphasis on the person that is replacing the person that is no longer with us as possible. I think that's the best way to do it. And Static X had a very hard challenge because, as we've established, you had to not only replace the vocalist, but you had to replace the mascot as well.
Yeah.
But if I was Linkin Park or I was involved on that creative team, I would either do it with a celebrity, an icon that could do the job, or I would do it with somebody that just did a fantastic job and just keep them in the dark. And I don't think the fans will mind that person's in the dark. In fact, I think they'll respect it. And maybe eventually they'll ask that person to come out of the shadows so that they can like see them and participate with them. But if you just put somebody up on that stage and you call it Linkin Park and they run around and like act like they own that stage, that's going to feel really awkward.
Yeah.
And I say the same thing. That's what I told Dino about Fear Factory too. I was like, dude, you guys are so badass. It's just strobe lights. Like, put that dude in the back and just let the fucking band, like, you got Tony Campos and Dino. Like that, you need more fucking star power on that stage. Like, now what are you going to put some person that no one knows and they're going to jump up on their monitor and go, get your fucking hands in the air. People are going to be like, well, I'll probably do it because it's Fear Factory. But like, I don't know, I would let that dude earn it. I would like go sit in the back and like let the strobe lights hit and just do your job. And I think it will identify and connect with people in a more, again, legacy kind of way, which is what these bands are doing.
Yeah.
It's different for Pantera because Phil can walk out on stage and go, get your fucking hands in the air. And it's like, it's
and
fucking
he's going to do that about 10 times.
Of course, I'm the king of metal. Put a crown on me. It's like, of course he is. Like, and God bless him for it,
Yeah.
But in those cases where the singer is the one that's not with us, it's a different animal. And again, everybody's got their own ideas of what they would do, but I think most people don't think it through. They just go like, well, I would do this. It's like, all right, well, good thing I didn't listen to you.
And you're waking up tomorrow and going to your job, and I'm the one that's actually got to live by these decisions and get up on that stage and sell it every night.
Yeah, and at the same time, like, I'm also the one who has to, like, put my arms around his fucking mother and father and sisters and brothers and go like, our goal here is to make sure that people get to continue to experience this band, but also to make sure that they never forget the recipe that put it all together. And that was 4 dudes. And the guy behind the mask is not one of those dudes and doesn't want to pretend to be one of those dudes. And again, I for the record, like, the last thing I would ever be interested in doing is going up on stage and being like, hey, here I am with a big Static X backdrop behind me and going like, we're going to play you some Static X songs now. Like, it just does not sound like a Static X experience that I would want as a fan. I would watch that and I would go, that's Static Dope. That's not Static X. And that's not interesting to me. So I'm glad that those guys had enough faith in me to like invite me into their world to listen to my ideas and my thoughts. And it all started with making a record. It all started with, trying to give life to those demos that we found of Wayne's and wanting to help those be fully realized. And me as a producer, Pro Tools wizard that I am, I was the perfect guy for that job. But the more we got into it, we realized that like, it's not going to stop here.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that this isn't going to lead to the band touring. And it's like, well, we got to get creative. So I'm grateful for that. And it was really awesome for Dope to be on that tour. And, for me to walk out there on stage every night and talk to the crowd and witness it, it was, it's pretty cool. You could really see the love people have for Static X and for Wayne. And I think they're really happy that it's back.
Well, before I let you go, because you are a producer and a songwriter, I have to ask you this question because I've been looking forward to your answer. So I ask everybody that is a songwriter that comes on the show, because I'm so envious of the craft and I can't do it myself. Give me an example of a song from any artist of any genre from a songwriter's perspective. It's about the craft, the construction of a song that's perfectly crafted. A song that you covet because you wish you wrote it because it's perfectly put together and executed. But then you got to tell me why. What you pick and why. So you can either put the songwriter hat on or the producer hat on, or both, I guess. But I've been very curious about your answer.
Oh,
I know. It's a shit question, but that's what makes the answer so good.
I mean, and it's going to be a very unpopular answer because it's going to be more. It's going to be producer, songwriter, all mixed into one, but more producer and more about just how it connects with people in the modern form. And I'm not sure I can tell you a specific song, but I'll tell you an artist, and you could just listen to their hits, and there would be 3 or 4 of them. I would say Calvin Harris.
Really?
Yeah, because there's two there in that type of music, which I guess you would call dance music, but it's really just pop music. There's 2 parts in those songs. There's the emotion part and there's the energy part. And it's a really weird turn that dance music did compared to rock music, where the energy part of dance music is like, it's the break, it's the beat, it's the drop, as you call it, but there's no vocals over the drops, but they're generally like the biggest parts of the songs, and they're also incredibly recognizable. But they're there for nothing more than for the energy. It's like the riff in a metal song. And then the emotion part is the vocal part. And in Calvin Harris's song, sometimes it's him that actually sings, sometimes it's a female vocalist. But that guy is just so good at crafting incredibly simple, emotional driven emotion parts with very simple but relatable lyrics that, at least for me, I can't listen to that guy's shit and not feel something. Like, I can't listen to it's sad right now because my brain has so much. I'm Googling something. I want to Google Calvin Harris songs because I want to actually tell you the song title. Can't believe I'm talking to Mistress Carrie about Calvin Harris songs.
That's what makes this a good question, because you never know.
So like, how deep is your love? Like, listen to that song again from that perspective. It's just like, if you don't feel something when you listen to that, like, dude, you're just not open to it. Like, you just have decided that you don't listen to that kind of music. But
it depends. I just talked to Giovanni from Giovanni and the Hired Guns, and we were talking about Los Cumbia Kings.
Yeah, dude.
It doesn't.
Like,
a good song music, is a good song. Yeah.
And like that, I Feel So Close to You Right Now song, which is actually Calvin singing, which is really impressive. But like, he's just really great at creating these real simple vocal emotion parts that are just really fucking excellent. And then the drops are also great. So I like that. I like that it's done with technology too. And for me to pick a perfect rock song, like, I don't know, there's just too many. I'd have to go down the rabbit hole, but I also really like that song Bang Bang by David Guetta. It's really fucking cool.
Been listening to a lot of pop music.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's more dance music, but it's dance music that became pop. But generally not a huge David Guetta fan, but like that Bang Bang song is like, do you know that one?
Not really, no.
Like, Google that one too. It's like, you'll be surprised. You'll be like, this isn't what I was expecting.
Well, I put together a playlist for every episode of the podcast, And all the music that we talked about, I put in the playlist so that if people haven't heard songs that we've talked about, they know they're in the playlist and they can go find them easy. And it's
nice.
Always...
We didn't talk about very much music, though.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did, because we talked about all the bands that you toured with and all the metal stuff. And so if somebody's listening to this that never heard Wisconsin Death Trip or never heard Pantera Walk or never heard a Seven Dust record, we talked about them.
We didn't talk about Seven Dust, but I wish we would have.
Yes, we did. You just said that it was.
Oh, I mentioned that we were on tour with
Static X and
Right,
Dope.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I always put together a playlist of all of those artists so that if somebody hears something and goes, I've never even heard of that band, that it might turn them on to something that they never heard of before.
So you're gonna make a playlist that's gonna have Fear Factory, Pantera, Static X, Calvin Harris, and David Guetta.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm totally into that. That is great. But yeah, check out, like, again, it's not rock by any stretch, but very well done. Those Calvin Harris.
That's why it's a craft songwriting question.
Yeah, it's very well done. Now, if you had to just ask me, like, who's my favorite artist of all time, I would tell you Prince, like, undoubtedly.
Interesting.
No argument. Like,
mine's the Beatles. It's like you've got your
fair enough.
favorite.
That's an awesome one too. Like, dude, Prince's Super Bowl halftime performance when he played the Foo Fighters, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And the dude just plays guitar like nobody's fucking business, and he sings his ass off. Like, that dude is just like, man.
I can't remember who told me the story, but I got to tell you the story quick, and then I have to go because I have to get back on the air because one of us has a day job.
Fair enough.
Both of us do. Somebody on the podcast, and I got to figure out who it was because I brought it up multiple times and I want to be able to cite them, said that we were talking about listening to the music that you record in your studios and going out and listening to it in the car, the way that the fans are going to hear it.
Yeah.
And that Prince used to do that. And he would leave Paisley Park and go out to the car and listen to it on CD. And if
do it all the time.
And if he didn't like it, he threw the CDs in the lake. And all those unheard Prince songs are on the bottom of that lake right now.
Somebody should go get them.
If that doesn't incentivize
CDs
you
are waterproof,
to get a scuba diving license.
No shit.
Can you imagine what's on the bottom of that lake?
I can. And I'm surprised that if that story is public knowledge, I'm shocked that somebody hasn't done it already.
Well, obviously somebody hasn't been listening to the Mistress Carrie podcast.
Apparently.
Because all of the world's problems get solved here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could solve a lot of world problems with Prince and some marijuana, that's for sure.
And the Beatles, too. Don't forget the Beatles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that.
It was so good to catch up with you.
You as well.
Thank
I very much appreciate it.
Wasting your afternoon with me.
It's all good, man. It's long overdue. I'm glad we got to do it. Hopefully you got some good stuff in there, and we'll do it again sometime. Maybe next time, since now we've done this big catch up, next time we can do something more specific.
Well,
not that I have an idea of what that would be, but
we can do it in person.
Oh, that'd be great.
Like, because you're going back out on the road next year with the new record.
Yeah, we'll be out in March. We'll be there in like February, March. That'd be great.
There you go.
Yeah, and I don't know if I can come to you because my brother is in Boston. He always comes to my Boston shows, him and his family.
I will come to you.
Yeah, you come to me and we'll do it on site.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Might even be cool to do it with my brother, because you remember my brother used to be in my band.
I know.
And now my brother's like I'm not going to say one of the biggest because that's the wrong word, but my brother's an incredibly successful video game producer. Like, my brother produced Guitar Hero and Call of Duty, and like, my brother's a bad motherfucker. So he's had a very interesting road. Like, when we got dropped from the major label, my brother went peace and went into the video game business. I kept being a fucking rock and roll idiot for another 15 years before I got into the video game business. So
I'll sit down with the Dope Brothers. I'm all about it.
I think that would be really cool. Like 25 years later, the Dope Brothers and Mistress Carrie. That would be really cool.
That would be very fun. Well, it's a date. I'll see you when you get to town.
Sounds good. Be good. Thank you for everything. Say hi to Boston for me, or whatever you want. I call it Boston, even if it's not Boston.
Dude, we're in 130 countries now. Every state in the United States and 130 countries around the world. So the podcast is growing every day. We're taking over the world.
Well, keep it up, man. You got all my support. Anything I can do for you, I'm here.
All right. I love you, honey. It was good to see you.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
The one and only Edsel Dope. The new song, No Regrets, and the video for it just got released. And the new album, Blood Money Part Zer0, is due for release on February 24th of 2023. And if you want to see Dope out on the road with Static X, Fear Factory, Mushroomhead, and Black Raven, they're headed out on the road in 2023 with a date in Boston at Big Night Live on March 21st. Get the link to that show and so much more in the show notes of this episode. You'll also find the link to this episode's corresponding playlist filled with all of the music that we talked about in this interview, and there's a lot. You'll also find all of Edsel's social media links, the link to his company ECCO Studios, and you'll find all the links for the band Dope and the Mistress Carrie links as well. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday, plus every weekday you get the sit rep. The situation report is around 5 minutes long, and it gives you all of your rock news, music headlines, and industry info and entertainment details, and it makes it really quick and painless so you can get on with your day and know exactly what's going on. The Mistress Carrie Podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Progressive presents Adjusting to the Suburbs.
I never really thought about tools until I bought a house in the suburbs. It's like this weird homeowner test if I need a tool for a project and don't have it. And my neighbor Ted loves to give me that look when I ask to borrow a pole saw. A year ago, I didn't even know pole saws existed. And now I gotta borrow one from Ted? What is happening?
Anyway, when you save with Progressive by bundling your home and auto, that's the easy part of adjusting to the suburbs. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company coverage provided and serviced by affiliates and third-party insurers.
92% of households that start the year with Peloton are still active a year later.
All because of a fancy bike?
Not just bikes. We also make a rower.
Have you ever tried to row? Too hard.
Not with Form Assist. It actually teaches you how to row. So it doesn't matter if you're a first-time rower or a seasoned pro. Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. 92% stick with it. So can you. Try the Peloton Row risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only. Not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial.